Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. What up, everyone? Welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on YouTube, X, and Rumble, where we talk about the culture war, but with a heavy emphasis on doing deep dives into the far left, because the far left are the ones who control everything. The far left are the most dangerous. And you know what? There is more content on the far left on the internet, or should I say rather produced by the far left on the internet, than one could ever watch. And so since no one else is doing it, we might as well do it on this channel. And I'm actually really excited about, I always say this. I feel like I'm turning into Joshua, because Joshua, every single time that Joshua runs an astrology chart for me, or every single time he looks at something and he has to report back to me to give me advice, he says, "Carlin, this is really good news." And I say, "Really, Joshua? Because you say that every single time." And he's like, "Yeah, but I always mean it." And I'm like, "Okay. I mean, there's got to be bad news sometimes, right?" But Joshua doesn't like to give me bad news because I get upset when Joshua gives me bad news. So he always tries to frame it in the best possible way. Anyway, I know some people, by the way, speaking of Joshua, I know I didn't officially announce this, but I announced it on the stream, but I didn't make a post about it or anything, and people were confused about that. So we didn't have nothing remotely controversial this week because Joshua had Valentine's Day obligations to go to. So I'm very sorry if anyone missed nothing remotely controversial, but Joshua was off finding himself a Valentine. We have to make allowances. And so he'll be back, so don't worry about it. But back to what I was saying, I'm actually really excited about the stream that we're going to be doing today, because we are returning to a channel that we recently found for Socialism Saturday. It is, there it is, that one. It is the University of Chicago Center for the Study of Gender and Sexuality. And it's like you guys know, I love nothing more than finding a teeny, teeny, tiny little YouTube channel that has like no subscribers and no views, and they post the most crazy socialist stuff imaginable. And the University of Chicago, being that they're of course in Chicago, did not let us down. They've got a ton of socialist content. And we watched one recently for Socialism Saturday. What did we watch? Oh, we need to watch this one, by the way. Look, I didn't even see this one. White women and the politics of white supremacy. I mean, come on. Come on. White women ruin everything, as we know. Which one did we watch for? We watched an Abolish the Family one for Socialism Saturday. Which one was that? Hang on. Which one was that? I don't know. It was some Abolish the Family thing we did for Socialism Saturday, and I decided there was more content that I wanted to go back and watch. Is Chicago more woke than Seattle? I mean, they're both pretty woke. They're both bad, but I think that Chicago, it's more organized into like their electoral politics. So they might be just like a teeny tiny bit better or worse. I don't know. Let's just say they're the same. Can we do that? So today and tomorrow, we're going to be watching content from this channel. Today, we're going to be watching a presentation called After Dobbs, Reproductive Freedom, Justice, and the Power of the State. And the reason we're watching this one today is it only took place like 3 months ago, so it's still relatively new. It took place on Halloween, of all things. October 31st, 2023, a conversation about this with lots of people. At the University of Chicago Law School, the 2022 Supreme Court decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization raises critical questions about the future of a constitutional right to abortion and the state's power over life and death, whose reproductive capacity and sexual behavior are being targeted for punishment. How is the enforcement of reproductive servitude? Reproductive servitude. Wow. Reproductive servitude. That is a phrase I had not heard before. How is the enforcement of reproductive servitude connected with idealized conceptions of femininity or maternity? What is this question really asking? Pop quiz for the chat. When the description says, how is the enforcement of reproductive servitude connected with idealized conceptions of femininity or maternity? What is that question really asking? Let me know what you think in the chat. How is the family policing system connected to forced maternity? How has the idea of punishment been transferred and justified through its specific exercise on women, specifically poor and minority women? How might locating the idea of reproductive servitude in struggles over the abolition of slavery reframe our thinking about forced pregnancy today? Let's go back to the question I asked. So, how is the enforcement of reproductive servitude connected with the idealized conceptions of femininity and maternity? Let's see what you guys had to say. It refers, well, it does kind of, but that's not what I'm going for. Women being forced to raise the future workers. Why? Give me more. Kind of. This is getting closer. Women doing the unpaid labor of childbirth and raising them. But why? Why? Go one step back. Everyone was going to say social reproduction theory. Motherhood equals the nuclear family. Well, yes, getting closer. About how servitude will uphold the nuclear family. Kind of, but I need more. Evil. Here it is. Here it is. Kind of. We're not quite there. Bot just got it. Evil capitalism forces women to have babies in family units to reproduce capitalism. And what it really says at the beginning is capitalism created the gender binary. Capitalism is enforcing these antiquated or social construct gender roles, not even antiquated. They don't believe they ever existed in the first place. The social construct of gender onto women, which forces them to have kids and raise the nuclear family and all that stuff. That's what that's talking about. So when we're talking about reproductive justice is an attack on the gender binary because socialists believe that if women are able to have abortion on demand at any time, for any reason, for free, of course, because they shouldn't actually be paying for it, then that is an attack on the gender binary because it will liberate women from the oppressive gender roles forced on them by capitalism. Let me know if people don't understand that in the chat, and I will be happy to clarify or add additional information. But that is what we're watching today, guys. I hope you're excited. We haven't done a reproductive justice presentation in a minute, and so I'm very excited. Now, tomorrow, we are also going to be watching another presentation from the same channel. This one's from a little bit longer ago, but I had to. There is no more perfect happy hour presentation to watch than a presentation about kink and football. And people were laughing at, why does my sound so crazy? People were laughing at the ball gag that I put on the thumbnail yesterday. But I didn't make this up. I didn't invent this. Look. Let's go back to their YouTube page. Look. Kink and football, and it has the same ball gag. So I didn't invent that. That is actually on their YouTube channel. Okay? I even found an image of a ball gag like shaped like a football, and I was like, no. Can't we can't embellish. We're doing the same ball gag. It has to be. And so that is actually a real image that they used on the real presentation. And so tomorrow for happy hour, we are going to get some beers and we're going to learn about kink and football. As we know, socialists do love BDSM for some reason. I think it's because BDSM is a dictatorship of the proletariat, but they might have some different ideas about that. Hopefully we'll get more information about the socialist obsession with BDSM as we make our way through the kink and football presentation. Isn't that going to be fun? But that's not all. That's not all. Coming up tonight, we have a very special episode of Nitwits because my sometimes internet boyfriend, Big Tech, is going to come on the channel and talk to us. And this little internet back and forth, like I thought the internet back and forth between him and I was going to last like a week and a half, and then we were going to go back to our own things, and he was going to do his streaming over on Kick, and he was never going to mention me again, and I was going to go do my thing. But no. The bantering has been going on for months, and it's time that we actually talk. And so he's going to be coming on the channel a little bit later. He's also going to be streaming it on his channel. So who knows what could happen. We are doing a late night stream tonight, and we're all going to be very, very nice to him because he's very handsome and I don't want to scare him away. But I'm looking forward to that later. That's going to be a fun time. We're going to start that around 10 p.m. And then on Saturday, I've got a great presentation picked out in honor of Valentine's Day. Kino. Oh, you don't know who he is? Kino. I will tell the story at 10 p.m. tonight, Kino. I'll take you down the whole rigmarole that has led to this place, okay? I can't believe you don't know who he is. Where the hell have you been? Like, that actually makes sense though, because like I actually don't think that my audience has heard about him as much as his audience has like heard about me. So I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be great. Anyway, for Socialism Saturday this week, we are watching a presentation from a podcast called The Red Nation. And the presentation is called Romantic Love is a Weapon of Capitalism. So I can't wait for this one. It's going to be perfect for Valentine's Day. We're doing that at 6 p.m. on Socialism Saturday. So please, if you want to come to my streams, go make sure to set the reminders on YouTube. Maybe if you set the reminders on YouTube, YouTube will actually notify you of when I'm streaming for once. I don't know. That would be nice. But make sure you do that. I've gone through all this trouble of getting ahead of the game and setting streams up early so people know what I'm streaming. Please take advantage of it. Come on. I would appreciate that. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, of course, please make sure you are subscribed to my Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. This is where I post all my best stuff on the internet. I've got a couple things, hopefully, fingers crossed, going up later today that I'm pretty excited about. So please make sure you sign up on the Substack for email notifications. You can sign up for free, but if you do want to support the work I'm doing and keep me in business, because I am 100% funded by you, please make sure you sign up for $8 a month or $80 a year. Oh my gosh, I'm already why am I losing my voice? Why am I already losing my voice? I haven't even been talking today. Jesus, it must be a cold or something. No yelling on the stream today. No yelling. I have another stream to do later, and I have a class with Joshua. Got to keep my voice up. Anyway, make sure you subscribe to the Substack. And also, please make sure, where is it? Here it is. Also, please make sure you're subscribed to my new-ish YouTube channel, which is a clip channel that I started a while ago, and then I stopped posting to it, and I never really talked about it. But I am posting clips to the clip channel now. It is youtube.com/@thebestcult. If you're not subscribed yet, please make sure you are. And I've been posting clips pretty regularly on there, and I'm hoping that having a clip channel will help break me out of this YouTube shadow ban bullshit that I've been dealing with for years. I've tried to break the algorithm on this channel. I do it every once in a while, and everything goes back to normal for like 2 weeks, and then boom, back into shadow ban hell. And so I'm hopeful that the clip channel, I'm actually excited about this. I am. Because I feel like my YouTube channel did not grow organically. It grew because I was this mythological thing of the Democrat who went to the Trump rally, and all these people subscribed, and I was on all these shows, and it didn't grow organically. And I want to grow a channel more organically, because even though it may be smaller, I do think it's actually going to be a better audience and people who will be more appreciative of what I'm doing. So make sure you subscribe to the clip channel, youtube.com/@thebestcult. And I think that's all I have. That's all. Let's start the presentation so I can have a cough drop, because I don't know why I'm losing my voice this early. That's crazy. Please, guys, make sure you mouth the like button for me if you would be so kind. And we are watching After Dobbs, Reproductive Freedom, Justice, and the Power of the State from the University of Chicago. Let's get this party started. Pray the sound is okay. Why am I losing my voice? God damn it. God.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Zerilli, and on behalf of the Center for the Study of Gender and Sexuality, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, which is going to feature distinguished scholars and professors, Michelle Goodwin, Dorothy Roberts, Mary Siegler, in conversation with Jeff Stone. Today's discussion is part of a series of talks that have been organized by the Center on questions of sexual freedom, reproductive justice, and women's equal citizenship in a post-Roe world. Before introducing
Women's
Professor
equal
Stone,
citizenship,
who will lead the discussion and properly introduce our guest speakers, I want to thank the many people who have made it possible. At the law school, thanks to Dean Thomas Miles and Dean of Students Charles Todd. At the Center for the Study of Gender and Sexuality, thanks to our current faculty director, Professor Daisy DeLoco, and former
the sound doesn't
director,
suck.
Professor Kristen Schilt. Thanks to Executive Director Gina Olson, Assistant Director for Student Affairs and Curriculum.
Actually, so Milo, did you see on Twitter they found another one? They found a black couple. They're like, the Daily Wire is like blowing up this black couple who decided that they were they weren't Democrats anymore and they were leaving the Democratic plantation. All of a sudden, there's a whole new, like, they have tried to replace me at least 3 times. At least 3. They tried to replace me about a year ago. They found this guy who went to a Trump rally, and he went on Fox News, and he was all like, it was really nice, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then like a couple weeks ago, Fox News emailed me. Literally, Fox News fucking emailed me, and they were like, Carlin, it's been a long time. Do you know any other Democrats who have left the Democratic Party after going to a Trump rally? And I didn't even answer that. And now they found another one. So whatever, I'm happy to be retired. I am more than happy to be retired as the Democrat who went to the Trump rally. I'm done. I did my time. I'm done. They can have it. I'm good. I'm just going to sit over here and watch socialism. It's going to be fine.
Bonnie Cantor, and most especially to our Assistant Director for Programming and Operations, Tate Brazos, who skillfully oversaw the planning of this event. Special thanks to Helen Galvin Ross, a brilliant PhD student in political theory at Chicago, who is working with me on this and related post-Roe events. Central ideas for this event originated in an exciting conference on feminism and abolition that Helen co-organized last year with Daniel Epstein and Kit Gindler at the Chicago Center for Contemporary Theory, also known as 3CT. Thanks to our co-sponsors, 3CT, and its faculty director, Professor Lisa Woodine, and Associate Director Anna Searle Jones. Thanks to the Posen Family Center for Human Rights and its faculty director, Professor Mark Bradley, and Deputy Director Adam Avrushin. Thanks to Professor of Philosophy, Dan.
Okay,
Ruffey,
lady.
and the college
Okay. Thank you to
Junior,
everyone. Thank you to everyone.
Scholar, professors of articles.
I don't care. I don't care.
Roe v. Dobbs.
Can we just get to the discussion? Sorry, I know we usually listen, but wait, Columbia. Hang on. Columbia.
What
Hello.
led to this event was that former
Fucking
Columbia
Columbia.
University President Bollinger and I
Always
put together
Columbia. Always.
this book, Roe v. Dobbs, the past, present, and future of a woman's constitutional right to abortion, which includes essays by 20 very distinguished scholars. And as you heard, the book will be out hopefully sometime in the next month or so. Lee and I were particularly interested in doing this book. It's our 7th together, but we're particularly interested in doing this one because, as Linda said, we were both law clerks at the Supreme Court when Roe v. Wade was decided. I was a law clerk to Justice William Brennan, and Lee was a law clerk to Chief Justice Warren Burger. So we've had both insightful understandings of that decision and how it came about, and also personal interests in its continuation or lack thereof. So our main speakers this afternoon, as I said, are highly distinguished scholars who contributed to this volume. Each of them will speak for roughly 15 minutes, and we will then have a brief discussion among ourselves and then open the floor for questions. Before I turn the floor over to them, however, I would like to make a few introductory remarks to put today's discussion into its historical context. So the story of how we got to Roe is important to remember, for it gives both content and context to the decisions in Roe and Dobbs. So let us begin at the beginning. At the time our Constitution was adopted, abortion was often relied upon by women to avoid the consequences of unwanted births. In that era, contrary to what many people today assume,
the consequences of unwanted births. Listen, I'm pro-choice. I am. But I'm not in favor of using abortion as birth control, because there's more than enough birth control available. Like, you can use condoms. You can get condoms for free. You can get really low cost pills. You can get things implanted in you. You can get there were birth control patches back. I don't know if they still have birth control patches. They probably upgraded now, but there used to be like birth control patches. Like, there was like all sorts of like ways that you can even pull out. That is in actuality an option. Like, you could have anal sex if you want. You're not going to get pregnant that way. There are any number of ways that if you don't want it, you could even abstain from sex. I know, like a shocking revelation. There are any number of ways that if you don't want to get pregnant, that you like, I had a metric ton of sex in college, okay? I never got pregnant. Why? Because I was responsible. So I really like resent these people who like, they get so kind of like dehumanizing about abortion. And again, like if you are in a position where like you really didn't have a choice, and I've been in a position where I didn't have a choice, and I was really thankful that if I had gotten pregnant from that time I didn't have a choice, then I would have absolutely used it at that point. And for that reason, I'm pro-choice, because some women don't have a choice. And unlike what conservatives like to say, like, after you have an experience where you don't have a choice, you don't just get up the next morning and skip down to the CVS and get the morning after pill. That's not how it works. Okay? And so in those circumstances, I believe that the right to that access to abortion is absolutely necessary. However, when they're saying like abortion helps women like avoid the unwanted consequence of pregnancy, I'm like, bro, go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. Most of you had a choice, and most of you had any number of options that you could have availed yourself of, and now you're completely dehumanizing things because you don't want the gender binary to exist, because you want to abolish capitalism and all this stuff. Please. These people make me want to be pro-life. And I can't stand pro-lifers. No offense to people who are pro-life. Like, there's a difference between pro-lifers and people who like are pro-life, like the pro-life NPCs. Like, the pro-life NPCs are just as bad as like the shout your abortion people, so far as I'm concerned. So anyway, it's very dehumanizing. I'm confused about the gender binary repression in light of birth control, because they don't want to use birth control is the thing. They think that they'll say that like birth control is one option, but what if birth control fails? You're still trapping women in a pregnancy that they don't want, which traps them in the home, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Abortion before quickening, that is, before the point at which the woman could feel movement, usually at around 4.5 months, was perfectly legal in every state in the nation.
Quickening.
And moreover, even abortion after quickening was almost never punished. Indeed, this had been the state of the law, at least as far back as the ancient Greeks. Although in the Middle Ages, the church condemned abortion as a sin, the law did not treat it as a crime. To the contrary, those who did not share the faith were free to do as they wished. For most families, abortion was seen as a critical way of managing family size. Indeed, in the early 19th century, approximately 20% of all pregnancies ended in legal abortions. The general acceptance of abortion began to change, however, during the 19th century. And two factors in particular contributed to this shift. First, religious perspectives on abortion began to change during the evangelical explosion of the Second Great Awakening, when evangelicals began to preach that a separate, distinct, and precious life came into being at the very moment of conception. Second, medical professionals in this era increasingly came to the view, based partly on their own religion and partly on half-baked science, that human life begins at conception.
Half-baked science.
In the late 1850s, for example,
Listen,
the Boston doctor and
listen, again, I'm not necessarily on board with this whole life begins at conception crowd. I'm not on board with that. I think that there are times when life begins at conception. I also think there are times when it doesn't. It's spiritual belief. I'm not going to get into it because every time I talk about spiritual beliefs, I get in trouble on the internet. But what I will say is I'm also not in favor of someone saying like half-baked science that says X, Y, B, and Z thing I disagree with. This is like a university professor. He should be better.
Religious moralist Horatio Storer emphatically put forth the notion that a woman should not decide the question for herself, because he maintained during pregnancy a woman's mind is prone to derangement. Over the next several decades, religious moralists launched an aggressive campaign to rid the nation not only of abortion, but of contraception as well. As the leading voices of the movement explained, the sole purpose of women is to produce children, and women must therefore remain within their...
There is none. There is none. You guys don't have science. No one has science. There is none. This is a question of faith, which is why, and I'm going to be honest, conservatives and Great Conservative, I appreciate you having having a chat with us in the community Zoom the other day, but I'm going to be honest, like, you guys are part of the problem in this, because your tactics around abortion have led to them winning. You guys are part of the problem. This should be a personal decision left up to the woman, and you guys need to keep your noses out of other people's business and other people's belief system, because not everyone believes that life begins at birth, including me. Hi. I'm just saying. Vaughn Cassidy, thank you for the super chat. Carlin, do you think that the basic premise of the Marxists is that every boundary should be destroyed? Nope, I don't. if that were the mindset, then the perception that the true leftists would want just chaos would make sense. I don't think that's what they want, Vaughn Cassidy. And what I would say is that I think that you need to spend a little bit more time with my work and watching my videos, because if you had spent more time with my work, you would know that I don't believe that that is the premise. They do want to quit the basic premise of the Marxist is that they want to abolish capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership. That is it. That is all it is. Everything these people do leads back to capitalism, which is defined explicitly as private property ownership. Any sort of like conjecture or ideas that go beyond abolishing capitalism defined as private property ownership are conservatives making things up. So stick around, watch with us. I will teach you, but this is not the basic premise. This is not the assumption.
God-given sphere. As a result of this campaign and a complete reversal of the world of the framers, every state enacted legislation prohibiting the distribution of any product designed for contraception, and every state enacted legislation prohibiting abortion at every stage of pregnancy, unless a doctor certified that the abortion was necessary to save the life of the woman. Thus, for the first time in our nation's history, abortion was unlawful even before quickening. And women who sought abortions were now themselves subject to prosecution. But despite the fact that the threat of criminal sanctions and the preaching of religious moralists, women in the 19th century nonetheless continued to seek abortions in record numbers. Indeed, by the turn of the 20th century, approximately 2 million women had illegal abortions each year, and almost a third of all pregnancies ended in abortion. But now, for the first time in history, these abortions had to be performed illegally, in secret and unsafe circumstances, and by much less reliable practitioners than in the past. By the 1950s, with improvements in contraception, which was now increasingly but still not universally legal, the number of unwanted pregnancies gradually declined. But even then, approximately 1 million.
And not everyone agrees with you, and you guys should be honest that there are a myriad of reasons why people might not agree with you, and there is no more science to back up your position than any other position. And we should be honest about that too. This is a question of faith. Faith is something that should not be legislated by laws.
Women each year had to resort to illegal abortions. The vast majority of these women had.
Vaughn, as I've already told you, if you spent more time with my work, you would understand this. You're welcome to go over to the Substack, check out the Woke 101 series, look specifically at the 4 goals of the woke left. I have explained this 19 ways from Sunday. So again, we can pontificate in the chat, or you can go back and avail yourselves of the resources that I've already given you. Those are your options. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. The problem with the abortion debate is that it all becomes quibbling over semantics. Sure, a zygote is alive, but conservatives can't separate it from being a fully sentient human being. It's unproductive. It's incredibly unproductive. It's unproductive on both sides, and it's what will cause conservatives to lose every election for the rest of their lives. But they don't listen, so it is what it is. I don't mean to be bitchy about it, but this is literally a topic that I talked about almost every single day in almost every single video I did for a full solid 2 years. So there's plenty of content that breaks it down.
To turn either to self-induced abortion or to the dark and often terrifying world of back alley abortions. In addition to those women who died in the course of these secret and illegal abortions, many thousands more each year suffered serious illness or injury. In the 1960s, though, the rising voice of the women's movement began to shape public discourse on abortion, arguing that, quote, there is no freedom, no equality possible for women
Why is my
until
video
we
dropping?
assert and demand the control of our
Guys, I'm gonna switch over my Wi-Fi to a different network. So the internet's probably gonna blink for a second, and I'll be right back. I promise, I'll be right back. I just don't know why my video is so choppy. Okay, is thing still running? Am I still here? Okay, let's keep going.
own bodies, over our own reproductive process. As these arguments moved to the forefront of national debate, the law began to change, and several states now, once again, legalized abortion. But the fierce opponents of both abortion rights and the rights of women more generally, such as the moral majority, quickly mobilized their forces and effectively shut down any further political progress, despite clear majority support at the time for legalizing abortion. Faced with this sudden paralysis,
So what gets me is the argument of companies would rather pay for a quick abortion than pay for parental leave and pay for a lost worker is made. It makes abortion sound pro-capitalist. Why is this incorrect? Why is abortion not pro-capitalist based on this rationality? Pop quiz for the chat. Why would the left say that abortion based on this specific rationality is not pro-capitalist? Well, I mean, actually, that they would say it's pro-capitalist, but why would the left not? I guess better question to ask: why would the left not be in favor of companies paying for abortion for this reason? Is a better question. Well, yeah, the babies are the future proletarian workers. No, this is not the answer. This is not the answer. Nope, that's not the answer. Nope, this is not the answer, guys. Do not default to your default answers. We're not doing this anymore. This is not the correct answer. This is getting closer. Bill coming in. The company, the bourgeois, still own you. Closer. Closer. Don't just repeat talking points I've given you before. That's not the answer to the question. That's closer. Why would the left say they don't agree with this? What does the left believe that capitalism does? Abortion paid for by the company means women are still in the labor force. The left doesn't mind women being in the labor force. The left doesn't mind that at all. Nope. Aha! Now we're cooking. Because capitalism extorts people. Capitalism is oppressive. When companies, where's the original chat? There it is. When companies pay for quickie abortions for their employees, the left would argue that is just another example of capitalism wanting to keep the workers oppressed, because the worker at the end of the day shouldn't need the company to pay for it. The government should be paying for it. And because the worker needs the company to pay for it, that means the worker is beholden to the bourgeois under the oppressive force of capitalism. Does that make sense to everyone? Yep, Prometheus, you got there too, because abortion should be provided by the state and not by the capitalist or corporate power, because that just keeps people oppressed. Exactly. See? I'm not going to be doing pop quiz questions that are just like things that are out of the box anymore. You guys, we need to expand beyond the normal talking points, okay?
In the legislative arena, pro-choice advocates began for the first time to challenge the constitutionality of anti-abortion laws in the courts. And in a series of lower court decisions, judges held that state anti-abortion laws were unconstitutional because such laws trespassed, quote, unjustifiably on the personal privacy and liberty of its female citizens.
I appreciate that, Vaughn. Thank you.
Soon thereafter, the Supreme Court announced that it would hear the case of Roe versus Wade. And many Americans today think of Roe as a radical left-wing decision. But that was not at all the view at the time. To the contrary, by 1973, a substantial majority of Americans supported the right of a woman to terminate an unwanted pregnancy. And although the Constitution does not expressly mention a right to abortion, the Supreme Court had long understood that the framers of the Constitution did not intend to limit the rights of Americans to only those rights that were expressly guaranteed in the Constitution. To the contrary, the court had often recognized constitutional rights that were not expressly mentioned in the Constitution, including, for example, the right not to be sterilized, the right to use contraception, the right to travel across state lines, the right to marry, and the right to raise one's own children. In an overwhelming 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court in Roe held that the Constitution did indeed guarantee a woman the right to decide for herself whether or not to bear a child. Startlingly, 5 of the 6 justices appointed by Republican presidents, including 3 of the 4 appointed by Richard Nixon, joined the decision. And indeed, without their support, Roe would have come out the other way. That speaks volumes about the mainstream nature of the decision in Roe at the time. The plain and simple fact is that at the time Roe was decided, the justices did not view the abortion issue as posing a particularly divisive ideological question.
Whoa,
I can, as I said,
Beth,
personally attest to that.
thanks for the super chat, Beth. So to clarify your last point, Carlin, it means fewer babies for capitalism to extort? Yes. Well, it does mean that, but that's not the point I was making. The point I was making is that the left believes that abortion should be free, unlimited, on demand, paid for by the state. The left does not believe that people should be reliant on capitalist, bourgeois, like corporations in order to provide access to abortion. So does the left mind that there are fewer babies for capitalism to extort? No. Now, this is not a depopulation thing. This is the attack on the gender binary and the nuclear family. The left wants the state to really, control all childbirth. They don't want the nuclear family to exist. But the point I was making is that they believe the government should provide free, unlimited abortion on demand. And so if you're relying on your company to do it, then that's still not what they want. But I appreciate the super chat. Thank you.
Because I was a law clerk for Justice William Brennan when Roe was decided. At that time, the justices regarded this as an interesting and challenging opinion to write, but none of them, even those 2 who dissented, regarded it as an issue that was in any way deeply controversial. It seemed to them necessary and appropriate at the time, given the reality for the lives of women before the legalization of abortion. Now, as we know, Roe eventually emerged into a bitterly divisive issue. But this did not happen until the end of the decade, as the culture wars exploded over such issues as the Equal Rights Amendment, gay rights, sexual expression, and women's liberation, thus inflaming religious conservatives into a single unified
Exactly,
political
Prometheus.
movement.
Exactly. Well
Indeed,
done.
by the summer of 1980, Republican Party leaders were treating Jerry Falwell, the head of the moral majority, more than any other religious figure in American history, like the leader of a powerful political constituency.
Oh, that's true enough. That was
And in his
dumb.
pursuit of the presidency, Ronald Reagan now called for a constitutional amendment to overrule Roe and promised to appoint pro-life justices at all levels of the judiciary, thus ushering in a historic era of judicial nominations shaped in no small part by religious conceptions of constitutional law. In the years after 1980, a succession of Republican presidents sought quite openly to appoint Supreme Court justices who would vote to overrule Roe. Interestingly, though, several of those justices, including Sandra Day O'Connor, Anthony Kennedy, and David Souter, disappointed those who appointed them, demonstrating both a respect for precedent and an understanding of the fundamental
But those
right at
evil
issue in Roe.
justices that Trump
O'Connor,
appointed.
Kennedy, and Souter consistently
They
reaffirmed
ruined
Roe v. Wade,
everything.
despite repeated efforts to overturn the decision. Having learned this lesson, though, Republican presidents from Reagan to Trump grew ever more determined not to replicate this mistake. And with the Republican appointments of Justices Clarence Thomas, John Roberts, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, all of whom were chosen in no small part because of their deeply embedded anti-abortion views, the anti-abortionists finally achieved their goal of overruling Roe. In the United States, before the decision in Dobbs, 30% of all women had at least one legal abortion during their lives,
What?
and just under 1 million.
Are you shitting me? 30% of women have an abortion? 30%? I legitimately had no idea it was that high. That's crazy. Like, why do women find birth control so hard? Like, I don't understand this. You can go to Planned Parenthood and get like birth control for like $10 a month, or at least like back in the day when I was on birth control. I'm not anymore, but like $10 a month I was paying when I was in college. You could get free condoms. Like, not getting pregnant if you don't want to is not difficult. Wow.
Women had legal abortions annually. Roe is deeply grounded in the justices' understanding in 1973 that we as Americans must have the right to make fundamental decisions about our own lives and our own destinies. Roe enabled women to chart their own futures and to control their own bodies. But with the court's decision in Dobbs, hundreds of thousands of women, mostly poor and minority, have once again been thrown back into the dark and dangerous world of illegal abortions. I'd like to make one final point. From 1973 to the present, among the justices not on the court in Dobbs, 9 Republican-appointed justices supported the decision in Roe, and only 2 opposed it: Rehnquist and Scalia. In the current court, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett all voted with Roberts to overrule Roe. That is the product not of law, but of determining the makeup of our court and the meaning of our Constitution through politics. Okay, let me now introduce our real speakers. Our first speaker, Michelle Goodwin, is the Linda D. and Timothy J. O'Neill Professor of Constitutional Law and Global Health Policy at Georgetown University, and the faculty co-director of the O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law. Before moving to Georgetown, Professor Goodwin was the Chancellor's Professor at the University of California, Irvine. In 2023, she received the California Women's Law Center Pursuit of Justice Award. And in 2022, she received the Margaret Brent Award from the American Bar Association. And in 2021, she received the University of California's highest honor, the Distinguished Senior Faculty Award for Research. Among her many books, her 2 most recent are Policing the Womb, Invisible Women, and The Criminalization of Motherhood and Black Markets, The Supply and Demand of Body Parts. Her wonderful essay in our forthcoming volume is titled A Requiem for Roe, When Property Has No Privacy. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you so very much for the invitation and that incredibly warm welcome. Thank you so much. All right, from the podium it is. Thank you so much. And what a great collection, and what a privilege and honor it is to also share the podium as well with Professor Dorothy Roberts and also Professor Mary Ziegler, 2 scholars whom I respect quite dearly and have great affection for, and friends in the audience as well. As was mentioned, my chapter is a requiem for Roe, and asks the question about when property has no privacy. And I think the remarks that you've just shared, Professor Stone.
When property has no privacy. Let's just keep that in mind. Her question is when property has no privacy.
Offer a terrific introduction in many ways, because you mention in the 19th century the rise of a force to criminalize abortion. And you mentioned the medical movement. And I want to add to that before I begin, just as a bit of a preface. Doctors like Horatio Storer and Joseph DeLee, we could also include Marion Sims in a different kind of arc and narrative. We're not just concerned about bringing a religiosity to the question of reproductive health, rights, and justice. We must remember that the very first laws in the United States policing reproduction related to American slavery. The very, very first laws that related to the status of—
So abortion is literally slavery, and what do they believe caused slavery? Abortion laws were born out of slavery because it had to do with property, because slavery was considered owning people as private property, which was caused by capitalism. Exactly. Capitalism caused slavery, capitalism caused slavery, capitalism.
Children born to women very specifically made children legally associated with their mothers rather than their fathers for a very specific reason. The enterprise of slavery, in so many ways, we've become numb to what it really was: kidnapping, trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking. And there's a way in which we understand the kind of bucolic fields of Mississippi and Arkansas and Alabama with their greenness and these light fluffs of cotton as seeming to be bucolic. In fact, so many people these days choose to get married in those settings because it looks so bucolic, such that it's really hard to then perhaps comprehend what was actually taking place behind American slavery, and the very first laws of our country being those that governed matters involving slavery, whether we were talking about criminal law, constitutional law, torts, or even contracts. And there's a way in which we displace other aspects of American slavery, because the image of people picking cotton by the sides of dusty roads in many ways obscures the other element of slavery that was so important, in which Thomas Jefferson wrote about to fellow politicians. As he mentioned that for him, it was useless just having a plantation full of Black men, because it was really with Black women and girls where the real profit was turned. Now, he wasn't talking about the fact that they just simply had a greater capacity for picking cotton more quickly than the men would. He said that they—
So her argument is that abortion, that conservatives or slave owners in this case wanted to outlaw abortion because if their slaves got pregnant, that was property that they were basically stealing from them if they had an abortion. Does that make sense to everyone? That's what the argument is. Abortion, laws against abortion go back to slavery because the bourgeois capitalist slave owners didn't want the female slaves to be basically stealing their private property by aborting any children that they might have.
we're turning a profit every year or two. This year or two profit that he was talking about and advising another politician.
See,
this is the way in which—
and this is why, to the questions that Vaughn was asking earlier, this is why it's really important to understand that the number one goal of the woke left is to always abolish private property. That is what the definition of capitalism is. Because if you understand that their primary concern is always abolishing private property, any question they have, just work back from how do they consider that related to private property ownership. That's what you have to do every single time. How do they consider that to be related to private property ownership? And you might have to go like 4 or 5 steps back, but you guys can always get there on your own.
You can stock your plantation was really about the sexual subordination, the assaults, the rapes that were such an intimate part and force of American slavery, but something that has been so systemically erased from our consciousness. It's not something that we speak to. Such that then when Horatio Storer and Joseph D. Lee are part of a burgeoning force, this new wave of gynecologists, after all, I have to take a moment here to just say
New wave of gynecology.
that as we think about gynecologists today, people with stethoscopes and white lab coats doing gynecological procedures, this was not part of the sort of fabric of medicine a millennia ago. These are not people with white lab coats roaming around the plains of Asia and Africa, whose work being done by women. Overwhelmingly, those who did the reproductive healthcare work in what became the United States were women. Nearly 100% of those performing that work, they were the midwives. About 50% of them were Black women, but they were also Indigenous and white women who were doing that work. And what's important to add to the record about Joseph D. Lee and Horatio Storer is that they were quite intimidated by this. In their writings, it said, they spoke to this. They were really quite concerned that the air quote men of medicine, who were really people who considered themselves the anatomist, wanted to study the anatomy of the body, would say to them, and their writings are all about this. You just read Horatio Storer's work and you see this. How upset they were that the men of medicine were saying, you're doing nothing more than women's work. What's so fancy about this stuff? Is sort of poor enslaved Black women do this stuff. And so part of the effort was, one, to push the women out of this work, and they were successful. We go from about 100% of women's reproductive health care being governed by women up until the mid-19th century. By the 20th century, about 1% of reproductive health care was being performed by women. But there's something else that was part of what these doctors did. And some of this work is captured by Christopher Roberts, who's a professor at the University of Minnesota Law School, as he writes about the American Medical Association. But they leaned into racism and white supremacy, which became an important key of their work and became an important aspect of suppressing reproductive freedom in the United States.
See, suppressing reproductive freedom is related to white supremacy, which we know that whiteness means capitalism.
They were part of a cultural narrative that we see rising today, this notion of a replacement theory. As they were doing this and sort of, beating the path of getting women out of this, there's also the deep concern about abolition. And why were they concerned about abolition? They were concerned about abolition because there were stories that were making not only the news in the United States, but around the world about the horrors of American slavery and about the purchase of American capitalism was made on the literal backs of Black girls and Black women. The beat of abolition was so strong that Charles Sumner, a senator from the state of Massachusetts, was beaten nearly to death in the halls of Congress by two of his colleagues in Congress.
I really think that we need to bring back the days where people in the Senate would just whack each other with canes. That really did happen, by the way. That's true. I learned about that in college. It's called Bleeding Sumner. I went to school in Boston. There is actually a statue dedicated to Charles Sumner in Harvard Square. And if you don't know this, Charles Sumner, literally, when they were talking about slavery and did she say capitalism? I thought I heard her say capitalism. I wasn't sure though. When they were talking about abolishing slavery, these senators from the South got so pissed off at Charles Sumner that they came into the Senate chamber and just hammered the shit out of him with a cane. And it was called Bleeding Sumner. We need to bring that back.
Why? Because only a few days before, he gave a speech about how pernicious American slavery was, how it relied on the sexual assault, and rape was the word he used to sustain itself. And he was beaten nearly to death and had to suspend his time in Congress for nearly 3 years while he recovered. But the stories of American slavery was making its way around the world, hence the strength of the fight with the abolitionists. And so I want to tell a couple of stories that really help to encapsulate just what these tensions were, because otherwise, if we don't pause on it, then it's easy to just fly above it. So I think about Sojourner Truth. But before I talk about Sojourner Truth, I want to just pause one moment and ask a question that probably has not been asked in this room and probably not many law schools at all. But what story does a mother tell her child the night before the slave auction? The night before she will be sold away or the child will be sold away. And she'll never see this child again. And her status is property, and so is the status of the child, property.
See, they're
Property by state law,
private property.
property reinforced by federal laws such as the Fugitive Slave Act. What story does that mother tell the child in order to hold on for a generation or two longer to understand its own dignity and personhood, despite environments that say that the child has no value or meaning higher than a cat, a dog, a pig, a mule out in the field? And so then the stories that are making the news of the time. Sojourner Truth, when she gives a speech before an audience, and she raises the question, ain't I a woman? Now it's interesting because so many people would say, yes, I remember that. And doesn't she ask about something about a carriage and about chivalry? But the part of this that also is kind of wiped away, we fly over, is she says, and I bore 13 children and saw nearly each one snatched from my arms, and nobody heard my cry but God, ain't I a woman? The rallying cry for abolition picks up. There's the story of Margaret Garner. Margaret Garner, her story, which becomes fictionalized by Toni Morrison, is important in terms of this drumbeat that's taking place that really begins to merge these forces that are intended to criminalize abortion, gain strength to the movement by Horatio Storer and Joseph DeLeet. And Margaret Garner's story, it reminds me of the kind of post-Dobbs story of the 10-year-old girl who flees the state of Indiana to make it to the state of Ohio in order to terminate her pregnancy. Margaret Garner flees the state of Kentucky to make it to Ohio for a taste of freedom. In her case, she's traveling with her children. She's 22 years old and traveling with several children and also some other companions. And unlike the comforts that we have, Ugg boots and parkas and all of those things, she doesn't have the benefit of any of this as she dares to walk across a river to freedom. Now imagine wanting a taste of freedom so badly that you will take your children and these companions and you will say, we will walk across a river and we must hope that the river holds us because we have to get to the other side for freedom. But Margaret Garner's story is heard all around the world because as the fugitive slave law provides for, and Texas's SB 8 law, interestingly, provides for, you can recapture people who have somehow offended the law. Texas SB 8, those who aid and abet in the termination of a pregnancy. Fugitive slave law, those who aid and abet with the person trying to get to this other freedom. And in her case, as she hears the dogs, and as she hears the voices of those who are coming to recapture her, she slits the throat of her first child. And then it is said that as she began to try to slit the throat of the second child, and she was overtaken, that she screamed out she could not return to slavery, and she did not want this for her child. Now, as this becomes, and I write about this in the chapter, this becomes part of not only a national story in the United States, but it becomes an international story. Because at the heart of it is the question, is she a person or is she property? If she's property, she returns to Kentucky, to the person who has owned her. If she's a person, then she can be criminally punished for the death of that one child and the harm to the other. This raises an important question in the United States, because if she is not property and somehow she is a person, then aren't all of these other Black women like her, these ones that politicians would read about in the morning news? And let me just take a quick pause here before I begin to wrap up. There's a piece that I have coming out in the, or I think it's out now, in the Yale Law Journal, Feminist Law Journal. And in it is a cast of advertisements that anybody would have read in their mornings while having orange juice and coffee. And in these advertisements, they speak to Maria, 15 years old, has escaped with her 2-year-old daughter, Lisa, mulatto, and on and on and on again, telling us something about slavery. Anyway, with Margaret Garner's story, if she is a person, then that means so many people who look like her are people too. Ultimately, she is returned to the Gainesville farm in Kentucky, and she dies before the age of 25. And I could share other stories just like that, which I do in this chapter. The story of Celia, whose story also made national news as well. In her case, is she property or person? She killed the person who purchased her when she was 12 years old and he was 70. In her case, the state of Missouri had a law that provided for self-defense in the case of rape, but it only applied if you were a person. If you are property, it does not apply to you. She was killed by the state the day after she delivered what was his child. As we think about the post-Dobbs reality in the United States, and let me be quick about this because we'll have time for Q&A. There are myriad scales of harm for us to pay attention to. Although we may see our times as being so far different, and in many ways they are, from that of a Margaret Garner, that of a Celia, that of a Sojourner Truth, that of Harriet Jacobs, who wrote the book Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, that really gave texture to the horrors that girls lived with during the American period of slavery. And yet there are certain aspects that tie into these times. Dobbs was a decision that adopted what Mississippi petitioned for. It was Mississippi, a state notorious in American slavery, one of the worst places. As my grandmother would say, Mississippi was the last place that a person wanted to be sent who was enslaved. Mississippi notorious for denying Black people access to swimming pools, access to being able to go into parks, access to the front doors of restaurants. The history is long. I would suggest you read Pauli Murray's book on race laws in the United States. And you could see all of the various things that Mississippi denied Black people. Playing billiards, bowling, things that we just simply take for granted or that just seem so absurdist. But it was this state with a notorious racial history, a state that only ratified the 13th Amendment in 2013, rather than 1865 or 1866, that petitioned the court to overturn Roe v. Wade. It was a state that even at that time had only one abortion clinic remaining. It is a state with one of the highest maternal mortality rates in all of the industrialized world. It is a state where Black women make up 80% of the population that dies due to cardiac death during pregnancy, but Black women do not make up 80% of the female population. And it is that state with a long and horrific racial history that asked the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. And it is the state that very recently captured by a journalist a story that many of you in this room probably read about a 13-year-old Black girl who goes into the 7th grade this semester with a child because there was no abortion clinic in the state of Mississippi that she could turn to, and not enough resources for her mother to get her out of state such that she would be able to flee like a Margaret Garner did, or the 10-year-old girl right after Dobbs. Thank you so much, and thank you.
Hang on. Guys, remember, we are not listening to this so you can argue with their position on abortion. We are listening to this so that you can understand the rationality that they are making. So if you're coming into this and you're just going, all these women are crazy and they just want to murder their babies and this is going to be a complete waste of time for you and you can go do something else. Or maybe that's all you want to do. Maybe you do want to waste your time. I don't know. But the purpose of this is to understand the rationality and how it relates back to bigger issues that the left is pushing for, okay?
Thank you, Michelle. That was riveting. Really wonderful. Our next speaker, Dorothy Roberts, is the George A. Weiss University Professor of Law and Sociology, the Raymond Payson Sadie Tanner Mossel Alexander Professor of Civil Rights, Professor of Africana Studies, and the Director of the Program on Race, Science, and Society at the University of Pennsylvania. Professor Roberts' path-breaking work in law and public policy focuses on urgent contemporary issues in health, social justice, and bioethics, especially as they impact the lives of women, children, and Black Americans. She is the author of more than 100 scholarly articles, and 2 of her most recent major books include Fatal Intervention: How Science, Politics, and Big Business Recreate Race in the 21st Century, and Killing the Black Body: Race, Reproduction, and the Meaning of Liberty. Her amazing essay in our forthcoming volume is titled The Failure of Dobbs: The Entanglement of Abortion Bans, Criminalized Pregnancies, and Forced Family Separation. Go for it.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks also to Lee Bollinger, although I don't think he's here, for putting together this book. Thanks, Linda Zarelli, for organizing the panel. It's an honor.
Nope, this is not the larger point, and you should know better. You should know better. I appreciate your support, bro. I really, really do. I appreciate you coming to the Zoom call yesterday. I really, really, really do. But if this is what you think the larger point is, then I'm not sure what we're doing here. And the narrative that Mark Levin is painting might be more your speed. And I say that because I want you to get it. But if this is the larger point that you're taking away, then I guess I don't know why you're watching my content instead of going and watching the conservative influencers who are going to tell you the narrative that you want to hear. This is not the point. The point is that they have a completely different perspective of the world. They have a different point of view than yours. They have different values than yours. And by the way, they're winning. So if you want to come here and say, this is just all about a story, and they use feelings instead of facts, when I'm sorry, but conservatives are way more feelings-based these days than leftists are. You guys are. That's why you're saying this answer, because you're in your feelings right now about all this. If you can't detach and put that aside and actually listen to them and understand that they do have a very distinct perspective here, and their perspective informs the tactics that they take in the world, I don't know what we're doing.
to be with such esteemed co-panelists, and it's wonderful to be back in Chicago and see so many dear friends in the audience. So, as the title of my chapter indicates, I wrote about the entanglement of abortion bans, criminalized pregnancies, and family separation. And my reaction to Dobbs was that it intensifies this entanglement, which is something that Roe versus Wade overlooked with its emphasis on abortion, and that the mainstream reproductive rights movement also overlooked by focusing so much on the right to abortion and not taking into account sufficiently how the denial of that right is related to criminalizing pregnancy more broadly, including punishing people who want to have a baby and do have a baby, and also the apparatus of family policing, or what's also called the child welfare system in the United States.
Oh, that's what that means.
Dobbs
Okay.
spotlights this entanglement by its focus on adoption as a solution to compel pregnancy, and intensifies the harms that Roe versus Wade allowed to continue. And I'll explain all this, but the title of my chapter is The Failure of Dobbs. It might be called The Failure of Roe and Dobbs, because Dobbs intensifies an oppressive situation for pregnant people that was already building up under Roe. So the adoption remedy spotlights the way in which the court relies on family policing in order to deal with the harms of compelled pregnancy. And it also brings together work that I've been doing for about 30 years. So Killing the Black Body was actually published in 1997. It's not a recent book at all, but unfortunately, my thesis and what I wrote about in Killing the Black Body, the experiences of the devaluation of Black women's childbearing, focusing mostly on the punishment of Black women for having children and how it's connected to abortion, or the restrictions on abortion, is connected to my latest book, which is Torn Apart: How the Child Welfare System Destroys Black Families and How Abolition Can Build a Safer World. And so I wanted to write a chapter that spanned this work, that focuses on the experiences of Black women for being punished for having children, and how that is related to compelling people to have babies and to the forced separation of children from struggling families. Okay, I'm going to tie this all together in 10 minutes. So adoption became a central aspect of the Dobbs decision, partly because anti-abortion activists have long relied on adoption as a solution to the obvious harms of forcing people to have children against their will. And even during the argument, people held up signs saying, "I will adopt your baby." And Amy Coney Barrett asked the attorney for the abortion clinics, wasn't it a solution to the problem of unwanted pregnancy by allowing women to turn over their babies at safe havens? Justice Alito took up that suggestion in the opinion explicitly by repeating the argument that all women had to do was turn over their babies at safe havens, and they could be assured that there would be a suitable home.
If I can clip a section from one of our senators here is starting to understand Marxist action, yeah, definitely send it over to me, two ladies. I appreciate all the stuff you're doing. I've got it. Two ladies, by the way. Let's give two ladies a shout out, because two ladies went and testified at, what was it, like a Senate hearing in your state or something like that? And I saw the video of it, and I want to post the video of it on the channel. And two ladies went and testified at a Senate hearing in his state, and he taught the senators about the language games that socialists play, and he plugged my Substack in his testimony. and it was great. So round of applause. Shout out to two ladies. I appreciate you.
Those are his words for these babies. He then dropped a footnote referring to a CDC report that said that there wasn't enough of a domestic supply of infants for all the people who wanted to adopt. So he framed this as a win-win situation. You give up your baby for adoption, someone gets to adopt your baby, and there's this well-functioning market for babies in America. Now, he leaves out completely the reality that children available for adoption are usually available, especially through the...
Vaughn, I hate to repeat myself. You need to avail yourself of more of my work. These are both the same thing, by the way. It's an intentional game, and they share our vocabulary, but not our dictionary. Sharing our vocabulary and not our dictionary is intentional. It's all intentional. Anybody see Rufo trying to figure out queerness today? What did Rufo say? What was he doing? I really haven't been paying. I've been tired the last couple days. I really have not been paying like that close attention to things. What did Rufo say?
Foster care system in America because of coercion, threats, and terror. The family policing system in America is a huge apparatus that forcibly takes children from their families, mostly on grounds of neglect, which is confused with poverty. The definition for neglect is basically failing to meet children's unmet needs. 200,000 children are taken from their families every year in the formal foster care system, and about that same amount are coercively taken through informal agreements that people are forced to sign on threat that something worse will happen to them if they don't turn over their children.
Seriously? Was that new or is that old? Rufo referred to whiteness as capitalism on a podcast? Because I've been trying to convince Rufo of this for damn near 2 effing years. And I got into a fight with Chris Rufo about this a couple months back on Twitter, where Chris Rufo was like, Carlin, you don't understand Cheryl Harris in her paper, Whiteness is Property in 1993. And I said, Chris, you don't understand Cheryl Harris from a speech she gave at UCLA Law in 2014, in which she explicitly said, seriously? Rufo fucking said what? Thank you. Finally, Chris. Seriously? Yo. I know I'll never get credit for that one. I know that because that's not the way that Rufo operates, and like, whatever, I'm over it. But like, I have been trying to convince that guy of that for 2 years. 2 effing years. 2 years. Jesus Christ. And he's getting queerness too. And I'm pretty sure he got that from me too, because I quote tweeted him the other day and I said that. I specifically quote tweeted Rufo like 3 days ago and said queer is not about being gay or trans. Queer is about a far left political ideology. But welcome to the party, Chris. We're glad you're here, bro.
Racist system. Black children and Native children are far more likely to be investigated, to be removed from their homes, and for their families' rights to be terminated. In other words, ending completely any legal relationship between children and their families. Half of Black children in America will undergo a child welfare investigation before they reach age 18. So this is the regular way of life for Black children in America, is to have their families investigated for child abuse and neglect. And so the way in which children are available for adoption through the foster care system is the termination of their parental rights when parents fail
Yeah.
to comply
I'm-
with a set of
I'm the influencer of the influencers that the influencers will never, ever, 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 ever acknowledge. Isn't that funny?
mandates that the court imposes on them. Dobbs, by forcing people who have decided they're not prepared to have a child to give birth, will only increase the numbers of struggling families in America who are at risk of having their families torn apart by the family policing system. So the Dobbs opinion's reliance on adoption is based on a false view of how adoption operates in the United States and will only intensify the harms that it overlooked in the opinion. Now, I also have a section in my chapter on slavery's entanglement of reproductive servitude and family separation, because I think it's important, as Professor Goodwin noted, to understand
Thanks,
the
Milo.
roots
Appreciate
of
you.
family policing and the institution of slavery. It also has roots in the use of child removal by the US military as a weapon of war against Native tribes. Those are the earliest roots of family policing in America, and it was used as a weapon against.
Wait.
and
I'm pretty sure they just talked about the roots of policing, the roots of family policing. So as a reminder, the left believes that the police were basically in the United States anyway, can go back and be like the origin of the police is to chase down and capture runaway slaves. I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm saying this is what they believe. The origins of the police in the United States are to chase down and capture runaway slaves. That's why they want to abolish the police. That's why they want to, defund the police, do all that stuff. They believe that the police are the managers of private property, which in this case, of course, are human beings. And so I think this is the point that she's getting at.
the harms that it overlooked in the opinion. Now, I also have a section in my chapter on slavery's entanglement of reproductive servitude and family separation, because I think it's important, as Professor Goodwin noted, to understand the roots of family policing and the institution of slavery. It also has roots in the use of child removal by the US military as a.
They actually believe it. Jesus Christ, like conservatives, for fuck's sake, conservatives. Yes, they actually believe it. Yes. Like, how is it possible that you guys keep showing up for my streams all the time and you haven't yet wrapped your head around the fact that they believe every single thing that they say in the same way that you believe every single thing that you say? I swear to God. I swear to God. They want to abolish all prisons. So yeah, they are against prison as an institution.
Weapon of war against Native tribes. Those are the earliest roots of family policing in America, and it was used as a weapon against enslaved mothers as well. And I relate very strongly with Professor Goodman's story about Margaret Garner and other Black women who escaped, but most Black women remained on plantations in order to take care of their children if their families hadn't been torn apart. And enslavers knew this. It was a way of weaponizing children to keep Black mothers compliant and on plantations. Family separation, along with compelled pregnancy, were both absolutely essential aspects of the institution of slavery. And when slavery ended,
Stony baloney, what the holy hell are you talking about? They have no proof of concept. Concept is the end of that. They don't. Why do I feel like we're going backwards in our understanding of the left? Why do I'm being serious right now. Why do I feel like my audience is going backwards in their understanding of the left? You think they have no proof of concept? Of course they have proof of concept. What are you talking about? They have ways to rationalize every single thing that they say. More so than the right does. Oftentimes the right just makes shit up out of thin air. They have rationale for every single thing that they say. I truly, guys, no, you are a newbie. Stony baloney is not a newbie. Stony baloney is not a newbie at all. Well, you're allowed to vent, but can we have it be productive at least? Because if all you're going to do is come here to push really antiquated political talking points that are coming from conservatives, again, I don't know what we're doing. If you watch them for, I swear to God, if you watch them for any length of time at all, you know they are not lying.
White supremacists who wanted to take back control in the South.
These are the days I
used
feel like I'm
the
wasting my
court
time. I'm
system
like, Jesus
to
Christ.
regain custody of Black children by petitioning courts, claiming that their parents
Maybe I'm
were
just in a mood to chatter now.
neglectful, and courts used an already existing apprenticeship system to return Black children to their former enslavers by the tens of thousands immediately after the Civil War ended. The other aspect of this entanglement that I discuss in the chapter is the criminalization of pregnancy. This is something I've been working on for a number of years. Professor Goodwin has as well. The punishment of pregnant people for conduct while pregnant, fetal abuse laws, and other uses of the law to prosecute, parole, punish in various ways people who are pregnant for not abiding by some state standard. And so beginning in the late 1980s, Black women especially were prosecuted for being pregnant and using drugs, but this has expanded into the prosecution of women who have stillbirths and miscarriages, all this taking place before Dobbs. But at least Roe versus Wade was a limit on it because many judges believed that it was a contradiction to punish women for having babies or for stillbirths if they could not be punished for having an abortion, and viability was seen as some limit on the prosecution for pregnancy-related crimes. Now that Roe has been overturned, states are much freer to punish people for crimes related to pregnancy, whether they have stillbirths, miscarriages. In fact, miscarriages can look very much like an abortion. And so there can be prosecutions based on either a miscarriage, a stillbirth, conduct during pregnancy that violates some state rule. And in fact, this is related, again, to family policing because in most states, drug use during pregnancy, this is supported by federal law, is seen as a form of child neglect. Again, this is an area that's extremely rife with racial discrimination, with many studies showing that Black women are far more likely to be.
Side note, has anyone been watching the Fannie Willis trial? Because I'm looking at some clips on Twitter where she looks rather indignant and it looks like it might be entertaining to watch. I don't know when I'm going to watch it. I have like all these streams set up already, but like Like, is it worth watching Elise Fannie Willis's testimony? Like, did she have a total meltdown? Oh God, people did watch it all day? Is it worth watching? She looks rather indignant in the clips I'm looking at right now on Twitter, which is like I don't care about any of this stuff. I like the circus aspect and I like the reality TV aspect of it. Okay, maybe we'll have to watch it. We'll see.
Be suspected of child neglect and drug use to be reported to child protection authorities and to have their children taken from them. So the Dobbs decision will not only increase the struggles of families, making them vulnerable to family separation, but also make it easier for
Maybe that'll put me in a better
pregnant people to
mood.
be prosecuted for crimes related to pregnancy,
watch
whether
that
it's
today instead of this.
termination of a pregnancy or these other types of crimes, right? So you see that Dobbs is dangerous and harmful much beyond its compulsion of pregnancy. That's horrible enough, but also its expansion of family separation and criminalization of pregnancy. Now, I close the chapter by pointing out that all of these aspects of state surveillance, regulation, punishment, whether we're talking about compelled pregnancy, punishment of pregnancy, or family policing, are related to a carceral logic that the way in which to meet human needs is to punish people, to punish the most vulnerable people. All of these forms of state oppression are going to be concentrated against the most marginalized communities. They already
The
are, but
proletariat.
it will continue to be concentrated in harming the most marginalized communities in America. So that the price of receiving state support for children is putting children in state custody. And more children will be put in state custody as a result of compelled pregnancies. A couple ways of thinking about this connection to carceral approaches is to look at the states that have the most restrictive abortion laws. And this.
Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna eat our vegetables, and we're gonna watch the rest of this presentation. And then, because I'm running early today, because I'm honestly not doing that much commentary on it. I'm kind of just listening. Like we're hearing some socialists speak, but it's like, maybe I'm being selfish. I don't feel like stopping every 3 seconds to like explain something I've explained 10 million times. I'm in a little bit of a mood, okay? But here's what we're going to do. We are going to watch the rest of this video, and then, contingent on me having time before I have to go to my class that I'm taking later, we'll watch the Fannie Willis testimony. Just the Fannie Willis stuff, though. That's all I want to see. I just want to see her have attitude. I don't know how long it is. Maybe we'll like does that sound good? Because I want to watch it, and I might as well watch it with you guys than watch it by myself. Did I see? You know what? Listen, man, I kind of feel like I feel bad for Rachel Dolezal. I do. I feel like Rachel Dolezal was like, I mean, kind of epically effed over, if I'm honest about it. If Rachel Dolezal had been a thing like 10 years later than it was, no one would have actually cared. And she actually seems like someone that's like literally just trying to like exist in the world, and she couldn't get any jobs because like she, because of all this scandal and stuff like that with her pretending to be black and da-da-da-da-da. And so I kind of feel bad for her. No, we never ever do this, because that's not about listening. That's about feeling productive when you haven't actually been productive. We actually listen on the channel. We don't do this. Okay, I'll find the Fannie Willis stuff, and then we can... Oh, it's most of the afternoon. Well, maybe we can kind of... Listen, if you guys don't want to stay and watch, you don't have to. Maybe I have a class that I have to go to at 9. I'm doing a 10 o'clock stream. Maybe we'll just muddle our way through it or whatever. Nope, we're not doing that. We don't do that. No.
States that have the worst support for families. They're the same states. Mississippi is one of them. The worst health care, the least support for.
Sam, I have literally talked about the stream at 10 like 15 times in the last 2 days. Like, it's literally scheduled. Has everyone gone retarded again? I swear to God, guys, come on. No, that's not going to happen. No. Listen, like, I don't know why you guys play this game of like challenging yourselves to consume as much content as you possibly can, because you know you're not actually listening when you do this, right? You know you're not actually listening. So what's the point? Feeling as though you've been productive when you haven't actually been productive? I mean, I don't know, if you want to make yourself feel better, I guess, but
families are the very states that have the most restrictive abortion laws. We can also see a historical connection between crime control, welfare restructuring, and adoption in 3 laws that were passed by Democratic Congress in the 1990s and signed by Bill Clinton, which also, I want to point out that these aren't just right-wing strategies. This is also a liberal, neoliberal approach to meeting human needs. The crime control law that expanded policing in Black communities and prisons passed in 1994, followed by the welfare restructuring law that ended the federal entitlement to welfare, passed in 1996, and then a lesser known law or recognized law, the Adoption and Safe Families Act, passed in 1997, that speeds up termination of parental rights and incentivizes states to put children who've been placed in foster care into adoptive homes with financial bonuses given to states if they increase adoption and speed up termination of parental rights. And this was advocated for explicitly in racial, I would say racist terms, because the argument was that there were too many Black children who were at that time 4 times as likely as white children to be in foster care. The largest group of children in foster care, even though Black children are still a minority of children in America, that the problem could be solved by terminating their Black mothers' rights and getting these children adopted, preferably in white homes, according to some of the advocates. So when we think about this entanglement of abortion bans, criminalization of pregnancy,
let me see if I can find the Fannie Willis thing.
Family separation, it becomes clearer that we should have a reproductive justice perspective on challenging these laws. And reproductive justice activists have stated from the very beginning, since the mid-1990s, that reproductive justice requires and recognizes the human right not to have a child, but also to have a child and to parent your child in a safe, sustainable, supportive community. And that is the world we should be fighting for, one where human needs are not met.
You guys know that that crazy presentation we watched about gender equity from the academic women in Oregon, where like what was the name of that old lady I was supposed to email, Marty or something like that? There's a part 2 of that apparently. They just launched it on their channel. We can watch that at some point. I got a whole back catalog of things we're going to be watching. It's going to be great. I never did email Marty though.
By compelling pregnancy, by punishing pregnancy, and by taking children away from their families. And we can imagine a much better world that is more humane, caring, and just. So thanks so much.
As you can tell, this is a great book. Our third and final speaker is Mary Ziegler, the Martin Luther King Jr. Professor of Law at the University of California, Davis. Professor Ziegler is an expert on the law, history, and politics of reproduction, healthcare, and conservatism in the United States from 1945 to the present. She's a 2023 Guggenheim Fellow and one of the world's leading historians of the U.S. abortion debate. Professor Ziegler is the author of numerous articles and 6 books on social movement struggles around reproduction, autonomy, and the law, including abortion and the law in America, Roe v. Wade to the present, beyond abortion, Roe v. Wade and the fight for privacy, after Roe, the lost history of abortion debate, which won Harvard University Press's Thomas J. Wilson Award, and most recently, Roe, the history of a national obsession. Professor Ziegler's wonderful essay in our book is titled The Anti-Abortion Movement and the Punishment Prerogative. Mary, take it away.
So my essay for this collection began in reading Dobbs, when Justice Alito tells us that our nation's history and traditions gave us not a right to abortion, but punishment for abortion.
I bet you this one's going to be the most militant of them all. You want to know why? Can anyone guess why I think this person's going to be the most militant of them all? Any guesses about why this bitch is about to annoy us? We've had to sit through a couple okay presentations. I think the first lady was better than the second. But why do I think that this one is going to be the troublemaker? Why do you think? Why do you think? Because she's a white liberal. White liberal woman. White liberal. White liberal. White anti-racist. White liberal Karen. White liberal savior. Exactly. They're always the worst.
That our traditions were those that were carceral. I noticed how much more punishment was a prerogative or interest of the anti-abortion movement than had been true historically. The penalties that were introduced in trigger laws in anticipation of the Dobbs decision, and the laws that have been introduced since had penalties much harsher than anything we had seen in the 19th century. Penalties up to and including life in prison. Exceptions to abortion bans that had once been standard have become affirmative defenses, with physicians or their so-called accomplices obligated to prove their innocence rather than prosecutors.
This testimony did go on forever, didn't it?
Who is an accomplice has changed in radical ways. Just recently, the attorney Jonathan Mitchell sought to subpoena the records of every donor to an abortion fund, painting them as aiders and abettors of a felony. So I wondered why this focus on incarceration, and was it possible to imagine a different focus? Because after all, the next stage for abortion opponents is fetal personhood, the recognition that the word person in the 14th Amendment applies the moment an egg is fertilized. And to hear the movement tell the story now, recognition of fetal personhood at a minimum will require the criminalization of abortion in every state, regardless of the will of the voters, and potentially the criminal punishment of people who have abortions and women as much for abortion as for the other kinds of crimes we've heard about today. So I was curious whether there was a point at which it was possible to imagine a vision of personhood for pregnant people or even for fetuses in which incarceration wasn't a mandatory or even imaginable solution. And perhaps the answer to that might have been no. After all, there's considerable path dependence. There was a 20th century anti-abortion movement, one I would submit that for the first time made arguments about constitutional fetal personhood, notwithstanding what some conservatives may tell us. That was a new argument in the 1960s, not one that would have occurred to Horatio Storer, who would never have dreamed of relying on a Reconstruction Amendment designed to give rights and personhood to people of color, when the idea of rights and personhood for people of color would have devastated and deeply divided his organization, as many in the American Medical Association admitted. So in some way, the 1960s anti-abortion movement in fighting for fetal personhood under the 14th Amendment was also fighting for a status quo defined by criminal punishment for abortion. So perhaps it might not have been possible to imagine a fight where personhood could mean something else. But I think a historical look suggests that that wasn't true. After Roe, more complicated than today's anti-abortion movement, rallied around a constitutional amendment that would have overturned Roe and recognized the word person to include the fetus. And this prompted an intense debate about what anti-abortion Americans wanted a constitutional amendment to do, not simply what reality they had inherited from Horatio Storer. And different options, in fact, carceral options, took less precedence than some imagined. Some scholars argued that simply passing a constitutional amendment would restore a status quo with 19th century criminal bans. But many abortion opponents thought that wasn't good enough. They wanted a better, different world. Some suggested that that passing a personhood amendment
Ha!
would require the criminal punishment of
Ha! You guys remember that fucking feminist? You guys remember that feminist from Redux who pretended she had an exclusive on that Montana family when she published the same story I did 4 days after I published it? Listen, okay, I'm about to say something bitchy and it's probably going to get me in trouble, but I'm not upset that she just had her account suspended on Twitter. I'm not upset about it. I'm sorry. People can say whatever they want, but I am not upset that that bitch that pretended that she had an exclusive when I published the story 4 days before her just had her account suspended on Twitter for some reason. Too bad, so sad, bitch. Karma. Sorry.
women. But this too is generally divisive. Many others suggested you might not need to have incarceration much at all. The favored solution also often involved the appointments of guardians ad litem, who were often named to represent persons with disabilities and others considered vulnerable and dependent. This solution, many hoped, would avoid criminal punishment and discourage abortion instead. Some even suggested that recognizing a fetus as a person would obligate the state to support pregnant people instead of incarcerating them by, for example, mandating child support during pregnancy or better access to contraception or neonatal care. There was no single voice that prevailed in these struggles, but what was clear was that there was no deliberate, inevitable moment in which the incarceration of poor people and people of color was not a choice. It was a choice, and it was a choice that came later for a variety of reasons that I think are illuminating. At the time that Roe came down, in its immediate aftermath, anti-abortion constitutional theorists wanted to argue that the fetus was like a person of color, that the fetus was the next vulnerable and dependent minority, deserving of protection just as women did under the Equal Protection Clause, just as people of color did under the Equal Protection Clause. And they argued that the sine qua non of equal protection law was vulnerability and dependence. This was a theory, of course, that ignored how equal protection law had often proceeded by focusing on a deep history of past subordination and its present-day effects. After all, anti-abortion lawyers conceded that fetuses had not suffered even by their own.
Now, because I've tweeted that I'm not upset that that bitch got her account suspended, like, I'm gonna have all these fucking conservatives and all these TERFs in my feed going, "You're pro-censorship, fuck you, baby, 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 baby," and I'm like, where the fuck were all of you when I got my account suspended for posting a publicly available email address on Twitter? Where were all of you? Oh, nowhere to be found? Go fuck yourselves.
Account a history of past subordination, the movement maintained that fetal life had long been honored by the law, not denigrated. But at any rate, there was still a recognition that vulnerability somehow counted and dependence somehow counted. And some early anti-abortion theorists conceded that it might be necessary to protect other dependent people too. Maybe persons with disabilities would be entitled to protection under this theory. But soon these constitutional ideas gave way as the anti-abortion movement struggled for relevance and prioritized its goal of banning.
I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore. I can't watch this anymore. I'm in a bad mood for some reason. I'm bored. I don't want to watch this anymore. Can we go over to the Fani Willis testimony? Would anyone be upset if we went and watched that? I'm sorry. I thought this was going to be better. I thought this was going to be more cringe. I really did. But it's just the same old stuff. I've heard all this a million times. I don't know why I'm in a bad mood. I don't know why. I really shouldn't be. Let's go watch Fani Willis. Sorry. Maybe we can finish that on Sunday when I'm in a better mood. Okay. You guys were right. There's a metric ton of testimony here. Wait, is that the right one? Wrong one! Wrong window! Wrong one! I should have known. Lawyers, I should have known. My bad. My bad. Live and learn.
This break where she is about to testify following Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade testifying today as well. We also heard from a close friend of Fani Willis who took the stand today saying that they absolutely had a romantic relationship prior to the time that they had initially said. So let's listen in here live to the Fulton County District Attorney, Fonnie Willis, taking the stand.
If you could swear in our next witness.
I would, and I do apologize. Hannah. Do me a favor. Put them on these movie glasses. After you swear, you can swear, you can wear this one, so I don't know what the first.
You swear on front of
Yes, sir.
the
District Attorney, Fonnie, F-A-N-I. Last name is Willis.
Ms. Willis, how did you know to come into the courtroom right then?
There were people I was pacing in my office.
Okay.
And I heard someone yell, his testimony is done. It only made sense to me that I would be the next witness. And I've been very anxious to have this conversation with you today. So I ran to the courtroom.
So as soon as you heard that Mr. Wade was done testifying, that's when you just assumed you would be the next witness?
It only makes sense.
Did you listen to any of the testimony?
I've been in my office pacing, ma'am.
Did you listen to any of the arguments?
I did hear the arguments this morning. It's ridiculous to me that you lied on Monday and yet here we still are. And I did listen to that argument.
All right, so that was it, just the argument, no testimony.
Right, I listened to the argument this morning where Adam Abadi, I thought, did an excellent job pointing out how dishonest you were with the court on Monday. And I'm actually surprised that the hearing continued, but since it did, here I am.
Great. So let's just talk about what you did in preparation.
No, this was like the
Did
beginning.
you meet with
So
Mr.
this is
Wade
not
at
live.
all?
This was at 3.
Once the motion was filed, did you meet with Mr. Wade and talk to him about the motion that I filed to disqualify you?
On this first January motion?
Yes.
I don't know if you could say talked about. I probably had some choice words about some of the things that you said that were dishonest within this motion. So I don't know that it was a conversation. As you know, Mr. Wade is a Southern gentleman. Me, not so much.
Okay, but my question was, did you have a conversation with
I didn't
him?
have a substantive conversation.
You did not.
I
Oh,
read
she
this
is
motion. I skimmed
Spicy.
it more up. So,
She is
and
spicy.
I've probably said some choice things to him about some of the lies they were told.
Okay.
And then printed in the media because, we used to be in a day and time where you had 60 Minutes and people did stories and they verified information and you had this great reporting. But it seems today that a lawyer writes a lie and then it's printed for all of the world to see.
Well, I just want to make sure that you answer the question I asked, though. So my question was,
Overruled, Mr. Abadi.
I told you what happened. I read the motion. I am sure I told him what my opinion.
This is much
of
better.
it is.
I feel better already.
And past
I'm
that,
starting to
we
come
had
back.
no
I'm back.
Substantive
Okay.
conversation.
you did not.
I just needed drama in my
Is
life.
there something you didn't understand?
No, I just wanted to make sure that
Okay.
you did not have a meeting with him in the conference room to discuss the
All
motion.
right, next question,
No.
Ms. Merchant.
So in the conference room of my office within this week, you produced some financial document. That financial document was given to me, something, and I'm not even sure it was given to him by me or Mr. Abadi gave it to me.
Lying.
And I
He's lying.
think he showed
He's
me
lying.
a document
You
in our
tell-
conference room. But as
Liar.
far as a substantive
She
conversation,
was creating
I
a
would not
story.
have-
She was
I don't
crafting
believe
a
I've had
story in her
any
head.
conversation with him that is substantive related to this.
Okay.
I have
Oh,
had
this is
conversations
great.
with him since you filed the motion, but they wouldn't be substantive to this. He sent me very nice sermons that have been done. And so we've had conversations about, did you listen to that sermon? Things of that nature. And I would say they were in relationship to this because I think he did it to be kind.
Okay. Let's start back in 2019.
Yep.
So you and Mr. Wade met in October 2019 at a conference?
That is correct. And I think in one of your motions, you tried to implicate I slept with him at that conference, which I find to be extremely offensive.
Why is
I
she?
stayed at that conference. Mr. Wade was my teacher. I did
Yo,
not meet him
yo.
when he taught the class.
Here's what I know about lawyering. I don't know a lot about this, but I know a very limited amount just from when I had to go and deal with Homeland Security over my husband's like green card and stuff like that. And so you don't when you're getting fucking questioned by someone, you answer the question that you're asked and like no more. If it's a yes or no answer, it's like yes or no. You don't elaborate. You don't go into a whole story. You don't start arguing with the person questioning you. Fannie Willis has apparently forgotten how to be a lawyer, which is the ultimate tell that she's wrong, and she knows she's wrong, and she knows she got caught for being wrong.
I was standing outside talking to Lisa Reeves, who is a judge. Me and her were just having a conversation. Mr. Wade walks up. I think they hug each other. They have some brief conversation. She introduces us.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. We kind of thought that when you asked the question, you can answer the question, not the speech, so I object to the speech.
I agree. I'm able to explain my answers.
I believe she's able to explain her answers.
And
That's, Ms. Merchant, that's okay. I can handle it. Ms. Willis, I'll ask you just listen to the answer, or excuse me, the question, and keep the answers confined to the question as best you can. I think you'll have more than enough ample opportunity on when the state is
Well,
able
it's
to ask
highly offensive
follow-ups.
when someone lies on you, and it's highly offensive when they try to implicate that you slept with somebody the first day you met with them, and I take exception to it.
All right, well, Ms. Willis, you'll have the opportunity to explain all of that when it's the state's turn to ask more open-ended questions.
Yeah.
Ms. Merchant.
Thank you, Judge. So again, my question was, you all met at that conference, though, right?
We did the meeting.
Okay.
He, as I stated, he taught the class. I did not actually meet him when he taught the class. I walked out of the class, and I'm not sure if it was that exact class or we had went to lunch, but we were standing in the vestibule, like outside of the class. Me and Judge Reeves were having a conversation. She had worked at a law firm I worked at back in 1996.
We're getting way afar. I mean, I don't mind her explaining her answers, but I literally just asked if they met at that
She's
conference.
explaining how she met Mr. Wade, which was exactly the question asked by Ms. Merchant. These answers are more than appropriate.
Ms. Merchant, if you want more concise answers, perhaps you could lead the witness.
I will. Thank you, Judge. Isn't it true that you met Mr. Wade October 2019 at the judges
He
conference?
hasn't gotten to the point where Ms. Willis should be treated hostile in this situation.
I think we're at that
Very
point.
much want to be here,
I
so
think
I'm
we're at the
not
point where she
hostile.
should be
I
treated
very much
hostilely.
want
Yes.
to be
Not so much that you're hostile, Ms. Willis, it'd be an adverse witness. Your interests are opposed to Ms. Merchant's.
Thank you. Merchant's interests are contrary to democracy, Your Honor, not to mine.
All right, let's
Judge, I
proceed.
would just ask that
We can keep things moving. Ms. Merchant,
Thank you.
next question,
Yeah.
please.
Okay, so we've confirmed when you met. After that, isn't it true?
No, I need to explain this, and I think I get to explain my answers. When I met him, Judge Reeves introduced us. He handed me his business card. I'm unsure if I handed him my business card, but we exchanged information. He said, if you ever need any help, give me a call. And he walked to the parking lot.
So after that, you started dating shortly thereafter, correct?
A lie. That's one of your lies.
Okay.
When did you
Do
start
know
dating?
Robin Yurdi?
When did you start fucking him?
I know her as Robin Bryant. I knew her. So Robin did not go to my college. She went to the college of, I went to Howard University. She went to Morgan State. I met her through some people I knew. In college, we hung out a bit, not much because she was in Baltimore and I was in Washington, D.C. But we hung out a bit. After college, I lost contact with her. I probably didn't see Robin again until maybe 7 or 8 years ago, a chance meeting here in Atlanta, but we did not have a consistent relationship from when I left college and came to Emory Law School here in Atlanta. But 8 to 10 years ago, just by happenstance, I ran into her.
So
she was in Atlanta.
You have been friends with Robin for 30-something years.
Did you hear my answer, ma'am?
Yes, and I'm asking if you've been friends with her
What
for
a
30-something years.
ton.
I've known her for 30-something years. We certainly hung out and partied together in college. She was from the DC area. She would come home.
How did this woman become a high-powered
wasn't
lawyer?
Close, but she was certainly in the girlfriends that partied together. And then, like I said, I ran into her about 10 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia. But we didn't talk throughout that time period. I didn't see her. I didn't even know where she was. When I ran into her, I was surprised she was in Atlanta. And so, yes, I have known her probably since 1990, 1991, but we have not maintained a consistent relationship that whole time.
For the last 10 years or 5, whatever you'd like to classify it as, have you been friends with her?
I have not spoken to Robin in over a year. I certainly do not consider her a friend now. I think that she, there's a saying, no good deed goes unpunished. And I think that she betrayed our friendship.
So let's narrow it down, the timeline now. So my questions are going to be from the time period of 2019 until she no longer was employed for you, the last time you all talked. So all of my next questions are just focused on that time frame, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Up until she left your office.
Yes, ma'am.
During 2019, you all were friends, correct?
Yes, we knew each other in 2019.
During 2020, you all were friends, correct?
We were friends during that time period.
During 2021, you all were friends, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And such good friends that when you needed a place to stay, you asked her if you could take over her lease.
That's a lie.
You did
That's
not
not
move
the-
into her apartment?
I
or her
did, but
condo?
that's not the way you characterize it is wrong.
I asked if you could take over her lease.
I did not ask if I could take over her lease.
Did you move into her apartment?
I moved into her condo in April of 21. The circumstances around that were that Robin met her husband. They wanted to move into another and separate place. She wanted to get rid of her condo. My father was living with me at the house. Because of this case and because of my stance on gangs, my life was being threatened regularly. My father urged me to leave our home. At the same time,
Like
as
they're
luck
playing
would
the
have
victim
it,
card.
Robin wanted to give up her
She's like,
lease
"My
because
life
she
was
wanted to
in
move in
danger,
with this
so I
man
had
she
to
met,
move."
who eventually became her husband. And so, as life circumstances worked, my dad was begging me to leave the house. He was afraid for me, afraid for his grandchildren. She wanted someone to take over her lease so that she didn't, have to pay a fee or get abandoned. And so, I don't remember when, but probably March or April of 21, I moved in and take over her lease.
And did you pay her or did you pay the leasing agent?
No, I don't even know who the leasing agent was. I paid her.
You paid her. Did you pay her cash or did you use a card?
There were some times that I would give her cash, but mostly I paid her via Cash App. That would be the most convenient thing. So I would not only give her rent, but then like when the utilities would come in, whatever the utility was, she might be like, I need $70, I need $100, whatever it was. And we never had a problem with money. Whatever she told me it was, I never asked to see a bill. I never questioned her. I just gave it to her.
What percentage would you say you paid cash versus Cash App?
Oh, the vast majority was Cash App. I don't know what percentage. I'm not going to guess that. But the vast majority was Cash App. But there would be times she would say, this bill came in at $70. Here goes $70.
Did you have a monthly rent amount that you paid her?
I can't remember. It was $1,500. I can't remember what it was. And it would vary, which I don't understand to this day. But like I said, I never questioned her.
When did you move out?
She said it was, that's what I paid.
When did you
I
move out?
abruptly moved out in February, either late January or early February of 22.
Of 22.
Yes,
February 2022, is that what you said?
January, February of 22. I believe it is January, but I paid her half the rent of February of 22 is what I remember. And because I was offering to pay the whole rent, even though I didn't live there, I didn't think it was right. And I ended up just paying her half the rent.
So that's after you moved out.
Why does this
You
matter?
said you paid her half of that. Okay.
Can anyone
And,
explain why
the
this
time that
matters?
you said you had to move out of your house because you were scared, did your dad stay there at your house?
My father was concerned. Yes, we were both concerned.
Okay. But he remained there.
My father's 80 years old. He would have been 79. He was scared to death of COVID. You have to go back to when this was. My father's an older man. I wanted him to move out. We had some discussions about him moving out, and what he decided was the risk of COVID was more dangerous than the risk of the people that were threatening. Typical man, more worried about his daughter and his grandchildren than his own safety. You'll get to meet him and you'll understand he doesn't scare too easily.
So your his grandkids were living at the house as well at that time?
Well, I don't know how old your children are, but when you have
Wait,
adult
Sid
children,
finally got blocked
they
by the
leave and
mills.
they come
Congrats,
back. They
Sid.
leave and they come back. So there have been periods of time that they're there.
The mills are blocking everyone lately.
Children do what children do. As long as their mother has a house, they'll come to it. Unfortunately, now the threats because of this case have gotten so extreme. I just pay a mortgage and no one lives there.
And that's what I was going to ask you. So when you moved out in, I think you said April 2021, you left your dad and your two kids at the house?
My dad and my
Sell
two
it.
kids were not at the house.
They were not. Okay, so they didn't still live at your house.
My youngest daughter certainly did not live there.
Okay.
My oldest daughter would come back and forth. I can't say month for month when she was there or when she was not there. I know that she has been there post me moving out. At this time, no one is at my house.
Okay. So at some point after you moved out for the safety reasons, at least one of your children did come
Ms.
back.
Merchant, can we get to either the
Yeah.
relationship or the
Sure.
financial benefit?
Yes. Let's see, we were back at 2021. So you were still friends with Miss Yeardy then. Were you also friends with Mr. Bradley?
I've never been friends with Mr. Bradley.
You've never been friends with Mr. Bradley?
No, I don't consider us to be friends. I don't dislike Mr. Bradley, but I don't consider us to be friends.
Is he someone that you would have in your phone and you would message with?
Is that who she slept with?
I might have text messaged him.
Okay. Would you text message him and Mr. Wade on the same conversation?
Oh, no, different guy.
I don't recall doing that, but if it happened,
I don't know
it
any
wouldn't
of their
surprise
names.
me.
Okay, so that wouldn't surprise you, the three of you. Okay. How frequently would you think that the three of you would have texted
Not
in a group
very.
chat?
I wouldn't think very often, but you're asking me to recall. I don't even know what time period you're asking me to recall, but I'm not going to speak to that because I just really don't know the answer to that. So I don't want to speculate as to how often that would happen. But it's not out of my practice to text two people on one text message. So if you told me that happened and showed it to me, it wouldn't surprise me, although I have no recollection of it.
Oh, okay.
But there would be some record.
She fucked Wade, and Bradley was a business partner of Wade.
Perhaps.
Thank you, Stony Baloney.
Talk about, you said that sometimes you paid Miss Yeardy cash. When you went on vacation with Mr. Wade, let's just go one by one. Let's start with the first one. What's the first time you went on vacation with Mr. Wade?
I think the first time we went on vacation was around April of 22, and a vacation is a stretch, but I'm trying to be comprehensive. I recall April of 22. His birthday is March the 18th. So that would have been his 49th birthday.
March 18th, Pisces.
I took him to Tennessee for the day. I think we went to a museum. I think we might have stayed the night. I'm not sure. But I mean, Tennessee's kind of hard to call a vacation, but I just am trying to be inclusive. And like I said, I know it wasn't more than a day.
So you're gonna spend the night?
I think that we did. That's what I'm telling you. I think that there's a possibility that we stayed that night in April of 22.
Who paid for the hotel?
I think I did. It was his birthday.
And would you have used a credit card?
Probably, maybe a debit.
The hell?
All right, we apologize about that. It appears that feed just went out on us.
Boo! I want it back. Luckily, we can fast forward. Okay.
Did we stay when the ship left, or did we stay when the ship came back? I also can't tell you. So there's 2 cruises out of Miami. There's one that's in that October time period that was with his mom.
They went on
and then there was
another when he was
that
married
was a
to
New
someone
Year's
else.
Eve trip. I know I paid for the New Year's
Yep.
Eve trip because the tickets were $697
This doesn't have to do with her being
and
a
I thought
Pisces.
this is ridiculous that the tickets are
This is not about her
$700
being
to
a
go to
Pisces.
Miami, but when you travel during New Year's Eve, they get you.
So let's just back up and talk about the first time that you went to Florida with Mr. Wade. That was the time that you said you stayed in Miami at the hotel the first night?
That's the time I told you I am not sure. So I'm not sure of 2 things. So I want to make sure that my testimony
What was
is
Wade
clear.
telling his wife?
I'm not sure if we stayed in Miami
when she went on a
the
cruise with
October
him.
trip. I'm not sure if we stayed in Miami on the December trip. I just can't remember that. And I also don't remember, so that the record is clear, I don't remember if the necessity was as we got on the ship or we got off the ship. But I do remember there was a night spent in Miami because either whatever, I don't remember. But I think that there was a night spent in Miami.
That cruise is the one that you took in October, right?
I want to go on a cruise.
Ma'am,
I haven't been on a cruise
if you
in
have
years.
something to refresh my recollection,
I want to go on a cruise
I'm intentionally
so
trying to
bad.
not be difficult with you, but I don't want to make up something.
Right.
I know that on one of those 2 trips, we stayed in Miami. I am not sure right now. You're asking me about.
Oh, I'm sorry, you misunderstood. I was not asking you which night you stayed in Miami. I'm asking if you took a cruise in October 2022 with Mr. Wade.
Yes, and his mom.
And his mother. That's what I was asking.
Yes.
Is that the first time you met his mother?
Yes.
It was on that cruise, and that was Royal Caribbean, I believe.
I honestly don't remember what ship. I know we've taken 2 cruises. I don't know what the ships were.
But he paid
bullshit.
for the flight and the cruise on Royal Caribbean that time.
So yes, he is the original one that does it. He has something called, Mr. Wade is a world traveler. I'm not as versed as him. He's been to 6 of the 7 continents. And so he has both a personal travel agent and he also has a cruise travel agent. I don't know anything about either of those kind of travel agents. So he is the one that would book the travel, but we need to be clear when we're talking about just because he booked it doesn't mean, like, I don't consider him having taken me anyplace. Let me just be honest. The only one that's ever taken somebody someplace is for his 50th birthday. I consider that I took him to Belize. And I took him to Belize because, I don't want to discuss his personal business, but I'm happy Mr. Wade is still here with us. And I did 50 big, very big.
Is she saying I took him to Belize because he was literally dying and we should be thankful he didn't die? Seriously, come on.
So still on that October Royal Caribbean cruise, even though he had a travel agent. I'm sorry.
If you do me a favor, I don't know what cruise ship, what time. So if you'll help me and say October cruise with Mama or the New Year's Eve trip with his sisters, I'll be able to, we can communicate. I just don't know what ship.
October cruise with Mama. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He paid for the cruise and the flights for that trip.
So he called his cruise
So he
agent
took you on a
and he
cruise.
booked that
Yes.
through them
Yes.
because
He paid.
has
Just say
a
he
cruise
fucking paid
agent.
for it.
Right. He also has a regular
Oh my
agent.
God.
I don't know the cruise agent's name.
So I wasn't asking about his travel agent. I was just asking
but
if
I'm
he
trying to-
paid for those.
He did not though.
Okay.
Because
Who
the
paid
reason
for
I
it then?
consider that he did not is I gave him his money back.
And I was
Oh.
about to ask that, but initially he paid for that.
Yeah, he called his cruise agent. Like I think they have his card on record. They do whatever.
Okay. So initially he paid for the cruise and the flight to Miami and the Royal Caribbean cruise.
And my understanding of that October cruise is like it was a package the lady did for him.
So, and I'll get to the reimbursements and all that. I'm just trying to confirm he paid for the flight and the cruise in October.
And I think that when you say things that way, I want this record to be
Initially.
abundantly clear that he calls his travel agent, he calls his cruise agent.
Oh my
They do
God.
whatever
This
he
bitch.
tells them. He's like
Oh
on a
my
first name
God,
basis
I
with these
hate her.
people. They do it, and then he tells me how much it is, and I give him the money back. I don't, just like you're asking me about the money with Robin, I don't do my friends like that. So if you tell me it's a G, then you're gonna get $1,000. Whatever it is, I didn't ever make him produce receipts to me. Whatever he told me it was, I gave him his money back.
Isn't it true that he paid for the cruise and the flight on his credit card? I'm not asking about reimbursement or after. He used his credit card to buy the cruise and buy the flight, correct?
I have no idea how he paid for it,
Okay.
if it's a credit card, if it's a debit card, but certainly he called his cruise agent. You know, like how many people have a cruise agent? He calls his cruise agent, tells them where they want to go. They tell him what's booked. You have to remember, he paid for that initial was me, him, and his mother.
Who
And
cares?
then after that cruise, you all flew to Aruba and spent a couple days in a hotel there, correct?
I love
Right,
Aruba.
and his mother was not happy.
He
that we
initially
I went on a
paid for
pirate
that.
ship in Aruba.
He initially
It
paid
was
for that.
great.
for Aruba, yes, ma'am.
I went
let's
snorkeling
talk
in
about
Aruba.
both of those.
Oh.
I know he initially paid for it. Did you pay him back?
For the cruise and for Aruba, yeah, I gave him his money before we ever went on that trip.
You gave him cash before you ever went on the trip?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so when you got cash to pay him back on these trips, would you go to the ATM?
No, lady,
You would not go to the ATM.
no.
Okay. So Fulton County pays you direct deposit, I assume?
Yes, Fulton
Okay.
County and the state of Georgia both pay me direct deposits.
Okay. So the cash that you would pay him, you wouldn't get it out of the bank.
I have money in my house.
You have money in your house. So it was just money that was there.
When you meet my father, he's going to tell you as a woman, you should always have, which I don't have, so let's don't tell him that. You should have at least 6 months in cash at your house at all times. Now, I don't know why this old black man feels like that, but he does. When we were growing up, my daddy had 3 safes in the house. So my father's bought me a lockbox, and I
He is
always
announcing for no good reason that she has 6 months worth of cash at her house and she wonders why people might show up at her house. That's just stupid. She didn't have to say that. She's on national television. What the fuck is wrong with her? Does this woman have any common sense?
always keep cash in the house. Now, I don't do it to the degree that my father would do it, so he would probably be ashamed with me, but I always have cash at the house. That has been, I don't know, all my life. If you're a woman and you go on a date with a man, you better have $200 in your pocket. So if that man acts up, you can go where you want to go. So I keep cash in my house, and I don't keep cash as good in my purse like I used to. I
mean,
don't go on many dates. But
listen,
when you go on a date, you should have cash in your pocket.
God dang, I need to
So
restart.
my question was, where did that
I'm not saying that
cash
it's not.
originally come from? If it
I had
didn't come out of the bank.
Why
Cash
isn't this
is,
paused? It says pause.
fungible. I've had cash for years in my house. So for me to tell you the source of when it comes from, when you go to
Yeah, my
Publix and you
computer
buy
just stopped
something, you
listening
get
to me.
$50, you throw it in there. When it's been my
Pause. Okay. I'm not saying it's not smart of her father to say that she should have cash. I'm not saying it's not smart to have cash at the house. My question is like, why is she just announcing this when no one asked? Like, did you pay him in cash? Yes, I paid him in cash. Like that, like there was no fucking long explanation required. It's like the woman doth protest too much.
whole life. When I took out a large amount of money on my first campaign, I kept some of the cash of that. Like, to tell you, I just have cash in my house. I don't have as much today as I would normally have, but I'm building back up now. So you just put money in. It's a very good practice. I would advise it to all women.
So you can't identify when you came into this cash or where the cash came from?
I didn't say I couldn't identify it. No, nobody gives me anything. I am sure that the source of the money is always the work, sweat, and tears of me.
Oh
What you
my
asked me
God, for real?
is,
For
when
real?
did the money go in there? What I am trying to tell you is,
I am an indentured
so I got
servant in the
divorced
state
in
of Georgia.
2005 from my husband.
And
No, it's important. You said, where did the money come from? And I need to tell you where
Please
the
let
money
this
came
get
from.
made into a
And
movie.
so for
Please let this get made into a movie.
I have kept
Please.
money in my house.
A
That
good
money
TV
in my
movie?
worst days has probably only been $500 or $1,000. At my best days, I probably had $15,000 in my house at cash. At all times, there's going to be cash in my house or wherever I'm laying my head.
the money that you paid Mr. Wade, the cash in October of 2022, you do not know where that money came from.
I do know where it came from. It came from my sweat and tears.
You know which job it came from. Did it come from Fulton County or did it come from a private job?
It came from, what are you talking about? So it could have come from a private job because before I was DA, I was in private practice. So I earned money during that time period. That's probably in there.
You don't
It
know
could have, what do you mean I don't know where it came from? I absolutely.
understand the
All right,
situation. We
all
can
right.
move on.
Okay,
I'm listening.
thanks.
All right.
Same with Aruba. You don't know where that cash came from either, right?
Ma'am, you are mischaracterizing my testimony greatly. I'm not going to allow you to mischaracterize my testimony. I know that I keep money in my house. The amounts of money I gave Mr. Wade, it was never that serious. I don't think I've ever handed him more than $2,500 in a reimbursement. So we're not talking about $20,000 in cash. I don't have $20,000 in cash right now. The most I ever gave him, I know I gave him $2,500 when we went to Belize because we went to one hotel and then we went to a second hotel. That $2,500 I actually gave him while we were still in Belize. I know that the Aruba trip, the one that you described with his mom, I think I gave him about $2,000 for that trip for like total.
His mom went to Aruba with you?
The Aruba trip. So I consider that to be one trip. So we got off of a cruise ship and then we went to Aruba, which is why I cannot remember is that the time that we had to stay in Miami to wait for the flight for Aruba. So I consider that one trip that we didn't like come back to Atlanta and leave. We flew down to Miami. We got on a cruise ship. We spent a couple of days with his mama. We came back to Miami. When we came back to Miami, either that day or the next day, we flew to Aruba. We spent a few days in Aruba and we came back. That was really one trip. Even though we went two places, it was one trip.
So let's talk about the California trip.
Napa.
Is that when you were moving your daughter out to California? When you all went, or did you have two trips to California?
My daughter doesn't live in California.
Did she ever live in California?
I'm not discussing to you the location of my child.
So how many times did you go with Mr. Wade to California?
Once.
And you all stayed in Napa Valley and he paid for the plane tickets and the hotel?
He paid for the plane tickets and the hotel.
And what did you pay for on that trip?
I gave him much less cash that time, probably $400 or $500, and then I paid for a bunch of stuff. I think we did 2 different wine tours that you do, which are pretty expensive. I think I bought him he likes wine. I don't really like wine, to be honest with you. I like Grey Goose. I bought him a bottle of wine while we were there, and the sippings that you do. I can't remember how many, like 4 or 5 different places you go. I remember we went to this place that they do pairings. That was the most expensive thing that I think that we did while we were there. So they would pair. They would pair.
Why do we need to know this?
Champagne, chocolate, and
dilatory.
It was like 3 different
Dilatory.
things.
That's a
Sweden,
libertarian
Russia,
word.
someplace else.
Dilatory.
I'll make that up. But that was the most expensive thing we did that trip, and I paid for that.
You pay cash?
For us doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that trip did not cost me a lot of money. I might have took like $750 in cash on me because we weren't gone very long.
I'd only asked if you paid in cash. I don't need to know the amounts.
When I travel, I always take cash.
And is the cash that you keep in your house, or do you keep it at the condo that you're living in?
So at that point, it wouldn't be at my house, and I'm sorry if I was not clear. The money would be wherever I laid my head. So I wouldn't leave the money at the house. So if I was unclear, no.
I just want to point out that if this woman can become a district attorney, then every single person watching right now can achieve whatever dream they have. Okay, maybe not playing in the NBA or something like that, but if there's something you want to do and you've been thinking about it and you're like, I don't know if I can do that thing, but you think maybe you can, I just want to remind you that this woman is a district attorney. And so, like, stupid people end up in positions like this all the time because they're the ones that don't question, can I do that thing? Can I do that thing? It's like Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where, like, the stupid people just go for it and they get the job because the smart people were like, I'm not qualified. I can't do it. It's too hard. And so the smart people hold themselves back from doing what they want to do while the stupid people put themselves forward. And that's how stuff like this happens. So whatever your dream is, just go for it. The worst thing that can happen is that maybe you don't get it on the first or second try, but you can get there eventually. Dreams do come true.
Money's going to be where I stay.
How much did you pay for your trip to Panama?
To where?
Panama, I believe.
I didn't go to Panama.
I may have the location wrong.
I never went to Panama.
So
Mr. Wade went to Panama with his frat brother.
Oh, he went to Panama with his frat brothers. So tell me about, let's see. So I want to make sure I've got them. I've got Belize. You already covered Belize. You covered the.
So let me tell you our real trips. In October, we went on the cruise with his mom. We got back from the cruise with his mom and we went to Aruba. I consider that one trip. Second trip, New Year's Eve, we went on a cruise to the Bahamas. That's the second trip. I want to make sure I get this right. Third trip, 100% on me. I think he might have spent $200 on that entire trip. We went to Belize. That was my trip. That was, his 50th. And then Napa Valley, we went around May. I don't know the dates, but it seems to me like it was close to Mother's Day.
And those are the only trips?
So that the record is complete. I can remember one time driving to, where were we? South Carolina, and we met my sister for lunch with her man.
When was that?
I don't know, but we didn't stay the night there. But I guess people would consider that a trip if you drive somewhere and you come back. That was insane because it was like 5 hours to drive. We ate lunch and we drove right back. I can remember driving to some little town in Georgia. I don't even know where I was. I had never been there before or after. There's some boat you can get on over to, and there's like a slave thing, if that gives anyone any reference. We didn't do that. I remember doing that. I remember driving one time to Charlotte. We had lunch with one of my very close girlfriends, and again, we drove to Charlotte.
This lady is more insufferable than the turf.
So that's a trip.
I swear.
We didn't stay the night there, but I just want to be complete in my
more
testimony.
Insufferable than the
drove
turf.
Someplace, had lunch, drove back. I don't remember another driving someplace distant for lunch and coming back to Charlotte to see a girlfriend, to meet my sister in South Carolina. We went by ourselves when I told you about that remote place in Georgia. We could have driven someplace else and had lunch and came back, but that's all that comes to my recollection right now. There could have been another place we drove and had lunch. My security team was very clear to me. I'm not to be out and about in Atlanta without them. And so for me to do something just very normal that a normal person would get to do, if they weren't prosecuting this case, I got to drive 4 hours to do it.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Your security detail, did they take you to and from your house?
They take, well, so I haven't been able to enjoy my home.
Condo, I'm sorry.
Since
And
March of
where you lay your head? Did they take you to and from where you lay your head?
99% of the time.
Would they take Mr. Wade to and from wherever you laid your head?
That has never in the history of ever happened, ever, okay?
Your security team has never taken him?
From my house? That's a lie.
I'm
That's
asking
another,
if they've ever taken him anywhere.
and I'm telling you that that's never happened.
So your security team has never taken
My
Mr. Wade
security team has never taken Mr. Wade from any place where I have lived and brought him here. Never, not once, not ever.
anywhere. Have they ever taken the two of you together?
To where?
Anywhere.
Well, we've left this building and for gone to lunch, but I go to lunch so rarely that is a very rare occasion. I am sure, and let me be clear, it wouldn't just be Mr. Wade. So I'm sure my security team has taken me to lunch. Probably been a time I've left here 7 o'clock, gone to get something to eat. And I don't even know that they would have taken him or if he would have driven himself, but they've taken me to do that. But we're talking very few, very far in between. Most days I don't even eat lunch. And when I do, it's because my assistant has heated up some bag, something, and I eat through meetings and eat in my office. It's
Oh
not a
my
practice
God.
of mine
This
to
is
go to
almost
lunch.
as bad as
During
the
the time period
abortion
that you were
thing.
dating, would your security team ever take you two together anywhere?
No.
Never.
If there was a lunch that occurred that I just described, if there was a meal that occurred that I just described, anything outside of that, and it needs to be very clear. Not often. Once, twice. Because I want to be over-inclusive, I'm saying once or twice. I'm not certain that it happened, but I'd rather be over-inclusive with you.
So your office objected to us getting Delta records for flights that you may have taken with Mr. Wade.
And, well, no, look. I object to you getting records. You've been intrusive into people's personal lives. You're confused. You think I'm on trial. These people are on trial for trying to steal an election in 2020. I'm not on trial, no matter how hard you try to put me on trial.
So my question was,
Spicy.
do you have any
I
problem?
object to getting any personal records of mine.
We're not dealing with privilege through a witness.
And I'm not, no, I'm not dealing with privilege.
What is she
we offered
hiding?
To put them in camera for the court to review, and I just want to know if she has any
That's not
problem.
something you deal with a witness.
What is she hiding? Why does she care?
Okay, you have to file as part of your job something called the Income and Financial Disclosure Report, correct?
That's correct.
And you filed your first one, so you filed 2 to date, is that right?
Is it 2 or 3? I probably would have filed 21, 22, and maybe I haven't filed 23 yet, because isn't it due like June of the next year?
April, I believe. So you filed, let's see, you filed your first one, it looks like April 15th, 2022, and your second one, April 17th, 2023. Does that sound familiar?
That I don't remember the dates, but you're an officer of the court. I'm gonna hope you're telling the truth now.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Thank you. I already gave the state a copy, exhibit 20 and 21, if you take a look at those. They were part of the certified records that we got.
Can somebody bring me some? Yeah. Guys are getting a little old. Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
those are the ones that you filed.
Yep, this looks like me for sure. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Judge, we'd move to admit 20 and 21.
I think you need to delineate which one's which
20
one's which.
is 2021, so it accounts for the time period, Your Honor, January the 1st, 21 through December the 31st, 2021. That is Defendant's Exhibit 20. Defendant's Exhibit 2021, it accounts for the time period, January the 1st, 2022 through December the 1st of 2022.
All right. Any objection to exhibits 20 and 21
Nope. Sorry.
from other counsel? Admitted without objection.
When did your personal relationship with Mr. Wade end?
Our personal relationship ended in this year, So let's be very clear so that we don't mix words. I don't want to mix words in here. Mr. Wade is my friend right now. Mr. Wade, I would say, has been my friend since 2020. I think he started out as like a mentor and a professional colleague. He became my friend and somebody that I really respected. I feel very indebted to Mr. Wade for taking on the task of this job. And he is certainly my friend and one of the people that I respect the most. So if you ask about a personal relationship, I consider myself to have a personal relationship right now, Mr. Wade. I consider myself to have a personal relationship with Anna Cross. I consider myself to have a personal relationship with Mr. Abadi. I consider myself to have a personal relationship with Andrew Evans.
Okay, let me just clarify that.
I have a personal relationship with him
Yo,
as we speak.
I
right
love
now.
coffee
I
ice
don't
cream.
think that's
Coffee
what
ice
you're
cream is the
asking.
best
I
ice
think that's
cream.
what you're asking.
Relationship. When did your romantic relationship with Mr. Wade end? Did it end?
When was the
Me and
last time
Mr.
you
Wade,
fucked?
We are good friends. My respect for him has grown over these 7 weeks of attacks. We are very good friends.
When was the
for
last
these
time you
It
fucked?
would have been a friendship that, as life goes, you would have stopped having. I think that you have cemented that we'll be friends till the day we die.
That, let's,
Could we just have an answer to the question?
I can handle Mr. Seda. Let's have
She asked about a personal relationship.
She asked when the romantic relationship ended. That's the question.
It's sometime in, I'd say late summer of 2023. So I don't believe in, this is what you're really asking about. This is the salaciousness of all of this, right?
No, I'm just asking about your romantic
Yes.
relationship.
When was the last time
dating.
you fucked?
I think that me and Mr. Wade, so he's a man, he probably would say June or July. I would say we had a tough conversation in August. And so that men in relationships at the end of physical intimacy, women in relationships when that tough conversation takes place.
And where, when did he come to, I guess, the condo? I'm not sure what you called it, condo apartment. Would he come and stay at that condo or visit you there? I'm sorry, visit you there.
What condo, what apartment? I want to be clear.
So not your house. I know you classified one as house and one as condo. So I'm trying to use those terms.
So but there's been more. See, what you don't understand is because of this case, I got to move. And so I
Ms.
need
Merchant, if you
to,
could ask a more precise question.
yes, please give me the time period.
Mr. Wade visit you at the place you laid your head.
When?
Has he ever visited you at the place you laid your head?
So let's be clear, because you lied in this. Let me tell you which one you lied in. Right
Oh
here.
my God.
You lied right here.
No,
No. This is the truth.
Hostile witness.
This is-
Hostile
it
witness.
is a
Dilatory.
lie.
Dilatory.
It is a lie.
Dilatory.
You see.
Mr. Seda, thank you. We're going to take 5 minutes.
This is great. Okay. Fast forward. I don't know why my computer is so goddamn
Things
slow
got
today.
a little heated towards
Fast
the end.
forward. Come back testimony. We need this magic to continue.
She put in 3 different documents.
Oh, hang on. There's no. Oh, go back. Go back. Why is the computer so slow? I'm gonna have to restart my computer. God damn it.
How often did Mr. Wade visit you at a place where you were living between 2019 and 2021?
So you want to start with the lie that he lived with me in South?
That's not what she asked.
A home he's never been to. That's one.
Literally
lie.
not what she asked. Literally has
Because
nothing
I
to do
didn't
with what
ask
she
her
asked.
about that.
Ms. Merchant, I want you to ask a very
Wow.
precise question. I think she's saying and answering that he did not live with her. So why don't we break that up into smaller
Ever.
parts?
And I didn't ask about living.
But you put in your, while we're talking about professionalism, she put in 3 different documents.
Well,
He
she'll
lived
have
with me.
full opportunity to respond.
In 2019,
He's never been to South Fulton. In 2019, I lived in South Fulton. He has never been to my residence in 2019, ever, not once.
Why is she so mad?
in 2019,
If they did nothing wrong,
he's
then
never
why is
been
she
to
so
your
mad?
any place.
I lived in my home in South Fulton before I started getting the threats that were here, a house I paid for with my own sweat and tears. I'm no longer able to live there. But in 2019, I did. And in the 2 months of 2019 that I knew Mr. Wade, 3 months, the beginning of October, all of November, and all of December, Mr. Wade never came to my house in South Fulton. Let me help you out. I lived there in 2020. He never came to my house in 2020, let alone live with me, as you put falsely in these documents.
Yeah, I think she's hostile.
In the first 3 months of 2021, when I could still enjoy my home, Mr. Wade never came to South Fulton, and it is certainly a lie that he lived with me.
So in 2020, so you said 2019, 2020.
I wonder if she's got
Did Mr.
Aries in
Wade
her
ever
chart.
visit you at a place that you
He
reside
has
in?
never been to my home in South Fulton. 2020.
We need to ask Joshua what her astrological chart is. I want to know. She's got some fire, whether it's like it's either probably Aries or Leo. Like, but she's got some. She's a fire. Like, I'm gonna bet it's Aries if I'm honest about it. Like, because like this is something I would do if I was getting indignant about a situation. But like, I wouldn't be stupid enough to do it like on the stand at a trial. I would do it in some place where there is far less consequence than on national television. At least I have that sense. That's my Libra. I push the envelope, but I don't push it like too far.
2020 was before I knew that a phone call was going to be made and I was going to have to abandon my home. As a result thereof, he never visited, lived at, came to, or has seen South Fulton.
You qualified that with your home in South Fulton.
That's where I lived in 2020.
2020, did he ever visit you at a place that you resided?
Okay, I don't understand. You're going to give me guys. In 2020, I lived in South Fulton.
Okay.
That's the only place I lived in South Fulton. That's before I had to abandon my home, Judge.
All right.
And at my home in
We're gonna
South
clarify
Fulton,
this. We'll break it down.
he never came there, okay? So if you don't come someplace, you can't live there.
Ms. Willis, I'm gonna have to caution you. This is gonna be the first time I have to caution you. We have to listen to the questions as asked. And if this happens again and again, I'm gonna have no choice but to strike your testimony. So we need to break this down. Ms. Merchant's question, I believe, was asking whether you lived anywhere other than South Fulton.
I did not live anywhere but South Fulton, Georgia in 2020. That is before I began my prosecution of this case, and it was my plan to only live there.
Judge is afraid of her. The judge is like, I don't want to do it. Don't make me do it. You're one scary
He
bitch.
visited that condo, yes.
He did.
Yes.
Did he ever spend the night at that condo?
No.
Just visited.
Yeah, but he did visit for sure.
Did you ever go out to eat together, other than the lunches you talked about,
In
during
2020?
2019 or 2020?
I would think that we probably went to lunch, but it wouldn't have been. Let me think.
Oh, she's a
2019.
Scorpio? Oh, okay. Now I understand. She's a Scorpio. Now I get it. Okay. All right. It's all coming together. So you can always tell. Thank you, Maria. Actually, let me take a picture of this. I'm going to send it to Joshua. Be like, can you run this bitch's chart? That's why the judge is afraid of her, by the way.
I don't know. I'm going to say we probably broke bread someplace in 2019. I don't remember it, but it seems like we would have broke bread sometime in 2019. So I'm going to say yes, although I have no recollection. But it seems to me like I go out to eat and drink with pretty much everyone. So I'm going to say yes.
So outside of the vacations that we've already talked about, did you ever go out to dinner with Mr. Wade?
I mentioned to you that
I'm going to object as to what time period. Like we're asking very vague questions. I thought we were treating the witness as hostile under 611. We're no longer doing that. So we're going to go back and forth. We need to be more specific with our questions if we're going to treat her as hostile.
All right, Ms. Merchant, it's not so much. I think you can elect between leading and open-ended questions, but I think we are still wondering about, and I think we need to get back on track of focusing on the financial benefit or the relationship.
And my next question about if you did go out to dinner, who paid when you went out to dinner?
He paid. I paid.
You both paid.
Okay, so let me be real clear. We didn't say, oh, the bill is $102. You give $51, I'll give $51. I don't operate like that with my girlfriends. I don't operate like that with anyone. He caught the bill, I caught the bill, whomever.
Did you ever pay him through Cash App?
No.
You only ever paid him through cash?
Well, yes. We're talking about, I'm very confused
You've
now.
never
Like,
given Mr. Wade money through Cash App?
no,
The only money you've ever given him outside of a contract is cash.
I didn't give him money in a contract, so that was cute, but I didn't give him money outside in a contract. What happened is, no, we're gonna answer it since you said it. He worked more hours than he was paid, and the county paid him for the work that he did. So don't be cute with me and then think that you're not gonna get an answer.
And I will ask you about the contract in a minute. I asked you about cash. Did you ever pay him anything? And I'm trying to qualify my questions. I'm not talking about the contract with Fulton County that was paid. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about outside of that. Did you ever pay him anything other than cash?
I've only given cash a few times in the course of what we're talking about.
So you've
If
never
we
used
would
your
go to
credit card?
dinner,
Let her finish her answer.
if we would go to dinner, I wouldn't give him cash because he paid for dinner or I paid for dinner. I've given him cash only a few times in life, probably 4.
Okay.
Probably the most money I've ever handed him is $2,500. The least amount of money I've handed him, probably between $500 and $1,000.
You never wrote him a check?
Ma'am, I don't have checks.
Okay. So you have no proof of any reimbursement for any of these things because it was all cash, right?
The testimony of one witness is enough to prove a fact.
So my
Are you
question was,
telling
do
me
you
that
have
I'm
any
lying?
proof?
Is that what you're intimating right here?
I'm asking if you have any proof that you paid him any
I
of
mean,
these
the
monies.
proof is what I just told you.
You have no written proof. Is that correct?
So I
Okay,
have some,
listen. All of the Scorpios in the chat need to fucking get a grip. There's good and bad to everything, okay? There is not a single thing in the world that is 100% good or 100% bad, and there is particularly not any astrological sign, with the possible exception of Capricorn, that is 100% good or 100% bad. If you are a Scorpio, don't get your goddamn feelings in a bunch, okay? Relax. I am an Aries with Pluto in the first house. I am a stone cold bitch. Don't be so offended. Play, goddammit. Play.
probably some transactions like in Belize. I probably spent $500 on my card in Belize. I spent $900 on each of our tickets to go to Belize. I did the $700. I probably got some minor expenses in Aruba that would be on a card. But for the most part, for those trips, other than, so the 2 cruises, I gave him money for those before we ever left because they were pre-booked. Let me answer.
Well, the question was if you had any written proof. And so
I've answered you that I've had written
we
proof.
can move to the next question. If you've answered if you had any written proof, and that was my question.
I want to make sure that we're clear that for the 2 cruises,
Judge, I asked if she gave him written proof.
We're not going to talk over each other. Ms. Merchant.
Some conservative journalist just posted that bitch at Redux magazine was targeted by bots for suspension after calling out an influencer for using her work. Really? 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 You're telling me that Anna at Redux magazine, who claimed she had an exclusive on a story that she published 4 days after I published it, Anna was upset that someone else used her work without acknowledgement? Oh my word. It's almost like karma came and bit that bitch right in the ass, isn't it? Wow. This right here, guys, this is proof that there is a God, and that no matter how hard things seem, God is always going to pay us back. And yes, Anna is probably going to get her account back, and she's probably going to be, and there's going to be this big welcome back and be like, oh my God, Anna, how did you survive being suspended on Twitter for a day and a half? Oh my God. Was it terrible? Was it terrible, Anna? I'm sure it's going to be all that. But like for the briefest of moments, God winks at us and shows us that karma is real. Thank you, Prometheus. Thank you.
She answered your question, so we can ask the next question. Ms. Willis, Ms. Cross will have plenty of opportunities to let you clarify your answers when it's her turn.
Thank you, Judge. Knowing your role as district attorney, you know that public funds are scrutinized and money is scrutinized and things like that. You understand.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You understand you're under a microscope. You have reporting requirements, all of those types of things. You have no record other than your testimony of the money that you've given Mr. Wade.
You've already asked that question. Let's keep going.
When you took office, you had a tax lien of $4,600. Did you pay that with cash when you made that tax lien whole?
I probably paid through however you pay.
Okay. So, but you were saying that you had amounts of cash. You still had that lien in 2022 when you were dating Wade and going on these trips. So the cash that you gave him, that could have been used to pay this tax lien off?
You gonna tell me how to pay my
I'm gonna
bills?
object. This is not relevant as it relates to why we're here today.
Ms. Merchant, are you trying to establish that she was insolvent in some way?
I definitely was trying to establish that she did not have these mass amounts of cash that she's talking about. Yes.
She wants the record of the money is what she wants.
Re-ask the question.
You had a tax lien in 2022.
She thinks that she played via credit card or something like that.
And you did not use this cash that you had to reimburse Mr. Wade to pay that off, correct?
No. I went shopping too when I didn't pay it all.
And you talked about, you gave a lot of interviews to some authors of a book called Finding Things, right?
I would not characterize it as a lot. I probably have spoken to them 2 or 3 times.
My question is relevant as to.
I think it's already come up that finances are discussed in the book. I'll overrule that.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilson, you can continue your answer.
What came up with Mr. Wade as it relates to hearsay statements that he was asked about in relation to what Ms. Willis may or may not have said in relation to an author. So it's not relevant to the testimony that's occurring at this time.
I think Ms. Merchant has said that inside the book, she also makes a statement as to her own finances, and that's at issue.
So you gave interviews to the authors of this book, correct?
Once or twice.
Okay. And
just to be comprehensive, I don't know if it was 3 times, 2 or 3 times, I think.
My camera's crooked.
You were quoted in the book, and I will give you a chance to say if this is a misquote. You were quoted, when they asked you about if you wanted to run for office for DA, you were quoted, "I really don't want to be financially effed up again." Do you remember saying that?
So what that refers to,
My question first is if you remember saying that.
I remember saying something similar to that, but I would like to be able to explain what that's in reference to. That's not in reference to anything else. It was a huge sacrifice to be district attorney in Fulton County, huge. I was doing just fine. I had a municipal court judgeship that was paying me $100-something thousand a year, and like you got to show up twice a week. Easiest thing I've ever done in life. I also had private clients.
Wow.
That were paying me to represent them, so I was able to have a law practice and that. Raising 2 daughters by myself, there were times in life where things were hard, and so I was telling people, I don't really run for DA. I don't want to run for DA. I'm in a good position right now. I got this easy job that I enjoy, being the chief judge of the city of South Fulton. I'm making money at the law firm, and I'm not sure that I want to make this sacrifice. And why does it always have to be me? Eventually, I prayed. I think that I was the appropriate person. I think that I did that. So when you're referring to that, what I'm saying is, why should I make a sacrifice again? And what I was not talking about is being district attorney. Once you get elected district attorney, you're in a fine financial position. I make over $200,000 a year. What I was talking about is I ran for judge. When I ran for judge, I took $50,000 of my personal money out of my retirement. And that money ended up being lost. And I know when you bet on yourself, you're going to have to bet money on yourself. And so what I was talking about was not wanting to go through the personal financial expense of running for office. By no means did I think that I was going to be financially in a bad position once I won. Let's talk about what I was up against, because it's important to understand that comment. I had a district attorney who had been here for 24 years.
And Judge,
People,
I don't
no,
wanna
this
interrupt
is,
her, but
it's
she's
very
answering
relevant as to
questions.
what my mindset was about this. So I'm trying to answer your question. So what I was saying is
Tailored solely to finance.
right, but it is about my finances.
If it's about
If I didn't, nobody put me in this seat. So I had already run for office once. I had spent $50,000 of my own money running, and it was vamoose, nothing. And so when I'm talking to those offers, I'm talking about the contemplation of the sacrifice of the run, not the sacrifice of once you become DA. The odds were against me. I was likely going to lose the election based on who I was running against. So that needs to be in the appropriate context.
Isn't it true that the authors also wrote, and you can dispute this if you'd like, that you were broke after that race?
The 2018 race.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a hard race. I wasn't broke like I didn't have any. So broke is relative to depending where you are, but that hurt to lose that $50,000. So I'm sure my mental mindset was like, I just gave $50,000 away.
Right. So they characterized it from their conversations with you that you were broke, you had poured your own money into the campaign, and you weren't able to pay your own bills because of your clients couldn't pay their bills to you, and you had a paltry array of family and asset forfeiture cases. It says you were trying to make it month to month. Is that an accurate depiction of your financial situation at that point?
I would want to read that, but I don't remember clients not being able to pay their bills. Or
May I approach, Judge?
you can.
You may.
Page 13.
I have not read this book. So like this fact here, her ex-husband Fred had run into a financial. I have no information
Okay.
about that.
Okay.
I just asked about.
As much as I'm enjoying this, I have to be realistic because here's the thing. First of all, we needed a little bit of a change of pace. That reproductive justice presentation was a lot. It was very lawyerly. I'm sure there are some golden nuggets in there, but I just feel like there are probably, and I should have probably previewed it before we watched it just to make sure. But like I feel like there are better reproductive justice presentations we could watch, and I'm glad that we gave up on it, and I wish I'd given up on it sooner. Sadly, I have a class that I'm taking tonight on various things to help me in the world. And so I want a little bit of a break before I take that class. And then later we are coming back because we are doing a very special episode of Nitwits tonight where Big Tech will be joining us on the channel to talk about stuff. And I don't know, you guys can grill him or like whatever. And it's going to be fun and it's going to be lighthearted and all that stuff. And hopefully I'm going to be in a better mood for it because I don't want to be a pissy bitch. Like that wouldn't be very nice. So I'm going to go and get myself in a better mood and I'm going to go take my class and it's going to be great. And then we're going to do this later. And so go get some dinner, go get a drink. Go gallivant about. Come back in a couple hours and we will be back. Thank you guys for hanging out with me and getting through a rather haphazard stream. And I will see you soon. Bye.